One, two, three. This will be the June 14th, 2018 Citizen Budget Committee meeting.
Welcome. I'd like to welcome everybody to the June 14th, 2018, 6 p.m. meeting of the Satellite Beach Citizen Budget Committee. If you'd go ahead and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to get started. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so first thing I'd like to ask, do we have any public comment on non-agenda items? All right, there appears to be none of that, so move on to the item 3, approval of the minutes from the June 7th meeting. Oh, forgive me. 4, yes, thank you. Does anyone have any kind of questions or concerns about the minutes from the last meeting? So the approval will just require a motion from someone other than the chair.
Motion.
Okay, Mr. Whitney.
Second.
Mr. Whitney moves to approve, and Ms. Sims seconds.
Cindy Berger.
Yes.
Desiree Hall. Yes. Andrew Schwartz.
Yes.
Vice Chairman Kevin Recker.
Yes.
Millie Sims.
Yes.
Larry Whitney.
Yes.
Chairman Trustee.
Yes. Okay. Tonight we're going to have a presentation from Community Development Department and the Police Department. I'd like to ask the committee to take notes, and everybody should have a pen, but take notes during the presentation, and then we can go around the table, round robin, and have questions or comments with the presenter. If need be, we could even go back around the circle one time after everyone has heard everyone else's questions. And I'd like to take public comment also at the end of the presentation.
Nice.
So, with that said, we're looking for the presenter for the Community Development Department.
And that'll be John Stone, our
Okay,
director.
Mr. Stone.
Suzanne, I can't get this in order. I smacked it a couple times, that didn't help.
Was it Stone? Mr. Stone?
Yeah, I hear something clicking.
There you go. You gotta get down. It's not intuitive.
Down the door. Down on the left?
Yeah.
I did it. Would it help if I turned around and
Then
it goes back?
So awkward.
Well, hello, everyone. I am John Stone, the building official, community development director, floodplain administrator, zoning administrator, and a few other assorted titles. You might ask how I can do all that. I don't. I am one of 4 people. It truly does take a team. And everything that I do, I would hope that somebody in my department can do, and they have proven that to be the case. And with that said, first question I have for you, did everybody get this? This is basically a detail that I didn't want to, in 5 minutes, bore everybody with a lot of the nuances of our department. This basically, it's not that, that's the PowerPoint. There's another one here that's got that, yes. It's got the city seal on it. That's an in-depth detail of what our department does. So essentially, you have my position that does those things we talked about, and then that includes also the deputy building official, who also does the plan reviews and the building inspections. And I got to tell you, this year we're probably going to double our numbers. I mean, we're looking at almost 2,000 building permits and almost 3,000 inspections that primarily Carl, he's doing during the day. In addition to that, probably we're going to hit somewhere around 200 plan reviews. We're just rocking and rolling out there. A lot of what I do as a community development director is try to retain businesses, encourage new business. So I'm always checking in with people like Jeff to find out what's going on out there in the real estate world, if he knows of any opportunities, and I share opportunities with him, because a lot of times it's about those relationships, and the realtors, you know, and the people with the money in their pocket, and the people with the business ideas. And so that's really what a development director does. As far as the zoning side of things, every day you get people calling wanting to know, can I do this in your city? And so you got to kind of work through all the nuances of their business ideas, as well as talk to them and if they're wanting to try to modify their business in a certain way. You know, you got to have a conversation with them and talk to them about the zoning codes that relate to it, and not as an obstacle, but as a way to help them get to where they want to be. So that's basically, in a nutshell, what the deputy building official and the building official do. Again, they're one and saying it's imperative that you have a continuity of services. To do that, I have found our department over the last 15 years go from swinging from 2 to 7. I mean, just all over the board. What really hasn't changed is the expectations that the community has as far as the services we provide. So what I have found is 2 definitely didn't work. 4 is absolutely the sweet spot. What that does is it ensures that continuity of services. So if one person is out sick, on vacation, whatever, they can still get what they're requesting, whether it be a building permit, a code enforcement case, or whatever it is. There's somebody there to help them that day with that. The other side of it is the administrative side. So again, it takes 2 people to do that. They're very distinct duties that the 2 administrative people do, but yet they are cross-trained, and that truly is what makes that number 4 successful, is the cross-training and making sure that somebody else knows how to do that job. Not to mention, with the amount of work that we have right now, one person cannot do those jobs, and generally it takes a team of 2 people. 2 people doing inspections, or 2 people doing code enforcement, or 2 people processing permits and that sort of thing. So on the administrative side, since we don't truly have a code enforcement, I think we got rid of our code enforcement somewhere around 2010. We actually had a 30-hour person that did nothing but code enforcement, was very proactive in that code enforcement. And during the budget cycle around that time, we chose to eliminate code enforcement and roll that process into our existing staff level. So we have all shared in my department in that responsibility from time to time. It's one of the few places that I know where you have a city manager that is, the organization is called FACE, Florida Association of Code Enforcement, FACE certified. So again, it's the only city I know that the city manager is FACE certified, the director is certified, the building inspector is certified, the actual code enforcement officer is certified, and what they teach you in there are the do's and the don'ts and the laws that pertain to the code enforcement, as well as the process and how to have a user-friendly type of code enforcement. So that's the code enforcement side of things. And as far as code enforcement, we process about 100, well, no, I'm sorry, we're at 150 right now. We will process close to 300 complaints in a reactive mode. So in other words, somebody calls, they get a complaint, and in some cases where we feel it's, health or safety issue, then we're obviously proactive on some of that. But I would say as a general rule, we're a reactive type of code enforcement, or some combination thereof. So even in that reactive manner, we will probably actually deal with 300 cases. And it'd be great if we could say, Mr. So-and-so, mow your grass, they mow your grass, and everything's fine. But unfortunately, sometimes it takes as many as 6 and 7 visits just to deal with one person's not mowing the grass, because of the verification process and the amount of days that you give them. You got to follow up with them. Usually it takes a conversation, sometimes multiple conversations to get to the ultimate responsible party, a property owner versus a tenant type of thing. So 300 isn't just 300. Sometimes it can be triple that in the amount of effort that you put into it. Kelly, she is my day-to-day code enforcement officer, and she does a fabulous job of doing that. She's got a great bedside manner. Same time, she gets the job done. And the fourth person in that mix of continuity is the administrative coordinator. That person handles business tax receipts. That's kind of her core responsibility. There's, I think, so we process 745 business tax receipts every year, in addition to, doing the permits and taking the phone calls that are constantly coming in, the lien requests, and the many other things that she does. That keeps us hopping. And again, just like with code enforcement, business tax receipts are not somebody walk in here, fill the form out, sign this, and let me stamp it, you're approved. Everyone takes a review. We have to look at it, make sure it's a permitted business, make sure that the fire and safety codes have been addressed. Each year, they have to be looked at on each building, so we coordinate with fire department on that. And then every year we do a renewal where we literally send out a letter to every one of those businesses. And unfortunately, not every one of those businesses send us a check. So that means that we go into this verification mode where we find out if that business is still in operation or they're just not paying the business tax receipt. And then there's a lengthy process if that doesn't happen. So now we talked about the core four. Well, here last year, we kind of embarked on another mission as a city, and that's sustainability. Sustainability, we have a guy it's a specialized avenue of our department. He's got a degree, I think, in environmental science of some kind. But he staffs our beautification board, as well as he does a lot of outreach in the community. He's doing like a summer school program with the kids right now, and really cool stuff that he's got going on. The community garden, the list goes on as some of the stuff that he's doing. In addition, he's also doing our GIS work. The city has not had a GIS person, so any GIS work meant spending money and hiring outside contractors. Now we're bringing this in-house, and Nick is getting up to speed with the GIS. But his first and foremost job and passion is with the environment. And as a longtime resident and native of this area, I really embrace having somebody that is tuned into our environment and putting that in the forefront. That's kind of the bulk of what we do as a city. As far as the development department. I wanted to keep this side of it short so it would allow more time for questions if anybody had questions for me. By the way, I didn't click through this, but that's why I gave it to you in a print.
Nobody noticed.
Yeah, it actually, to tell you the truth, it was a cheat sheet because I understand one of the things you guys were supposed to do was to marry up council goals with department operations. That's basically what that PowerPoint does. There's just 4 slides. There's not a lot to it, but it just will help guide you in that process, as well as the addendum here.
You ready for questions?
Lay it on me, brother.
Okay. Hold on just a second here. I just want to refer back to my agenda.
I feel better now.
So I think first we'll go ahead and take, are there any public comment for Mr. Stone? For Mr. Stone, I'm sorry. All right, then from the committee, we could start with Ms. Sims and just take our time and go around the whole table.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you for what you do for our city.
Thank you.
And for taking the time this evening to speak to us. I just have a couple of quick questions. GIS, I'm not familiar with that acronym.
Which GIS? Geographical Information System. It's a type of course, I'm not pro on this, but it's a software that allows you to locate like the infrastructure, where a sewer line is. It's got elevations, locations, and so it's a way to map the city, I guess is probably the best way to put it.
Yes, I got you. So he's somebody that's really proficient in that.
Yeah, it really is a specialized
Okay.
trade.
And then the other thing, I guess you had mentioned about code enforcement, that we used to have an officer up until 2010, and then that was for budgetary reasons taken out.
It was primarily, and there
My
was,
question would be, do you see any difference since then? Have you been here since then to see a difference as far as your budget revenue
oh, absolutely, yeah.
generated? Could you tell us? what
Yeah,
the
I believe, first off, it was around a $30,000 savings. And again, he was about 30 hours a week. More importantly, it was from the city perspective. The council has addressed the proactive, reactive countless times, and they've kind of hashed it out more than once as far as should they have a dedicated code officer, or is it working the way we're doing it now? Well, one, we're saving money. That's definitely a plus. But on a more practical level, the perception out in the community is just dramatically better. I mean, we used to be known as a business-unfriendly community.
Okay.
That was the biggest thing. You know, I don't think I've heard that word mentioned in years. Because when I got rid of the code officer, I took it over personally, and in order to understand what was going on, I really just had to start over. And the best way to start over was to learn it from the beginning again. And so I was out there meeting the public and talking to them, and I was, of course, hearing all the negative stuff that was because of the way it was. And so I started making changes. And ultimately, I did pass that on to Carl and to Kelly, and they have followed my lead pretty well. Rarely do I get calls into me because of the way my officers have dealt with the problem. You know, it's unfortunately, it's a negative thing that you're dealing with. You know, somebody's property rights, you got to take serious. And, you know, so we try to be understanding. But, you know, it's also there to maintain property values. And so it's really worked out well.
So, again, thank you for what you do. It sounds like you're kind of a goodwill ambassador to the business community, and we certainly need that, right?
Mhm.
So, how long have you worked for the city?
I've been with the city about 15 years. I was born and raised here, went to all the schools here. This isn't a job for me. This is my family, my community, my home. So I'm invested.
Thank you again, that's all I have, thanks.
All right, Ms. Hall?
I have nothing at this time.
Sure.
So, Mr. Stone, I guess, how have we done over the last 15 years in commercial development and business development?
Well, it's things are getting better. It's been relatively flat. I can tell you that the code enforcement thing we talked about certainly has changed that, because it truly did have fallout where, you know, one business owner talks to another and is like, ooh, I wouldn't go to Satellite Beach, you know, they're business unfriendly or this or that, you know. And that has absolutely changed. You know, I get compliments fairly regularly of businesses that want to be in the city and don't want to be anywhere else. They want to be in our city. And that's just been wonderful to hear that kind of news. We have a very limited commercial corridor, so there's only so much out there that we can bring in as far as business. We got a few locations that I'm actively working on. In fact, there's some that are actually on the hook already I can't talk about yet. But there are some good things on the forefront that you'll be seeing.
So, do you ever make zoning suggestions or
All the time.
any information to the council to guide them to say that, you know, here's a business that wants to do this, the zoning requirements are against it, how do we address this, or can we fix this, or?
I do.
How do you make your decisions based on?
Yeah, and you're right. You know, there has to be a relationship between that council, because a lot of what I do is, I can't say it's the flavor of the council, but it truly is. You know, there's a certain dynamic there, and after a while, you get to feel what it is that is important to them. And so, you know, when things aren't necessarily allowed by code, that's the time where I start having this conversation with the city manager, maybe some of the council members individually. And at some point, if it sounds like I'm getting some traction, then it gets brought up to a council level where it's actually discussed in the sunshine.
Community development still exists. I guess community redevelopment now is becoming a thing of the past.
Yeah, we actually have two. Yeah, there's a redevelopment and a development, you're right.
Are you sad at the loss of community redevelopment, or can we
No.
still make
No,
the
not at all.
accomplishments we want to make?
I'm not sad to see the community redevelopment go. And the reason I'm not is we can still do everything that redevelopment agency did. It's really about the only thing that we can't do is we can't capture that money that we sent off to the county. But the problem is when the county gives us money, the general fund of our city also gives money to that redevelopment trust fund. So that money has to be put back into the area where that money came from. So it has to be for very specific projects in the area that it came from, and it has to be addressed in the plan. So what ultimately ends up happening is your general fund takes a hit, and you don't have that flexibility as a city to use that money how you think is best fit. You know, you're now forced to put it into that area. So you're giving away the money to grants and all good things, but you know, giving money to a grant may not necessarily be as important as fixing your storm drains or something like that. That money might have been better off spent at. But unfortunately, you don't have that option. You know, for Section 163 that governs the redevelopment agency, very specific. You know, you have to identify the projects, got to be in the plan, and you know, if you don't use it for that purpose, you have to give it back. And we're actually in that strategy now where, you know, we're winding projects down and we're giving money back. We're giving money back to the county, we're giving money back to the city. And now we can use that in our general fund to do what the city feels is a priority.
So does your department have a plan, like a 3 or 4 or 5 year forecast of projects you want to do and how you want to guide the business development in the city? Or
Well, there is a CRA plan, a redevelopment plan. That's something that you have to have and you have to adopt, and it has to be discussed in a public
we're
forum.
using that plan to...
Yes, we're using it, and what we've been doing here is within that plan, we've been scaling back and scaling back and scaling back, you know, because we're trying to wind this thing down sooner rather than later because of, you know, the general fund needing the money as opposed to allocating it to projects that are really more of a kind of a feel good as opposed to a need to do.
I was just going to ask, I don't really understand the revenue side of things a whole lot, so when we talk about code enforcement, clearly understand that we're going to more of a reactive, but, you know, does your department, how do you collect revenue, or do you collect?
Sure. We will probably bring in between permits, plan reviews, business tax receipts, zoning requests, over, let's see here, $382,493. That was from last year. And again, we are, now permits alone, we'll probably, a conservative number is about 200,000. And I say conservative because I believe our numbers are going to almost double this year. But you don't want to budget according to what you're hoping to get. You want to budget on some history, and history says that 200,000 is a reasonable number to budget our income from. So those are basically where we generate the revenue.
Okay. And last question is just in regard to, you know, code enforcement. I understand that balance, and definitely you can see where the city council is coming from, but it sounds like in some situations where, you know, 6 or 7 times where someone doesn't mow their lawn, you know, are there policies in your opinion that we could adopt that would give us more teeth and better utilize our time?
Well, actually, we have made some changes. It is still, it's almost finalized. We used to have a code enforcement board, and that was part of the problem. You know, first off, it rarely met. Once I got rid of the code officer back in 2010, where we had three to five people going to the board every month, and you know, it was almost a game out in the community. You know, let's mess with the code officer, and then the code officer messes with them, and you know, it just wasn't working. Where when I took it over, we probably, and this is by spending a little extra time on the front end, talking to somebody. And, you know, you get the excuse that, well, my mower's broke. Well, let me see if I can find somebody who's got a mower that can help. Or here's a guy that mows lawns for a living. And so you spend the extra time instead of saying, mow the grass or else. I didn't do that. So what we ended up doing, because we had this great resource of volunteers that never met, is we changed that process over to a special magistrate, where it's basically one attorney that represents that code enforcement element, I guess you could say, and then you got the city attorney that represents the city in its matter. With that process, things have sped up, because, you know, now you can, well, the second part of that really makes us impactful is we also introduce citation power, where we can write a ticket to somebody. Where the civil infraction type of tickets that are out there now, they really don't work for code issues. So once we've got the language finalized on it, we actually had made the books up, but then, you know, we had a little bit of a snafu with some of the language in it, and it had to go back to the attorney. So we should have that fairly well straightened out within the next 30 days. And at that time, the code officer will have a ticket. And their marching orders is not to use that as a first resort. You know, that's not the taser, okay? You know, you still have those conversations, and you still give them an opportunity to comply. And if they're being reasonable and they're making efforts and they're staying in communication with you, then you continue working with them. But when you do get those habitual offenders, that's what the citation book is for.
Okay. So you see it possibly as a small opportunity to increase revenue?
No, you would never use the code enforcement process to generate revenue. That's just the wrong thing to do.
That's my question. Thanks.
I'll just pass for now. I'll pass,
Larry, speechless, really?
Well, if you really want me to.
No, you're good.
Thanks for your presentation. I know our commercial core is limited. What is the ratio of commercial to residential and or other zoning?
Good question. I don't really have that answer, but I will give you a little back history about our commercial core. We had a study that was done, I want to say maybe about 12 years ago. What they did is they looked at that balance of the commercial to the residential. And what they determined was there was an insufficient amount of commercial to support, we'll call it community commercial, to support that residential element. So we needed more. And so they, as a result of that, they changed the code, the comprehensive plan, which is like our Constitution, to basically say that you can't rezone anything from commercial to something else, generally residential, without an equal exchange of another piece of property being rezoned commercial. In other words, no net loss of commercial. And so that was the first thing we did to kind of plug that gap from getting any worse than it has. So, you know, unfortunately, we're only 2 miles long. And, you know, the interior of our city is residential by nature, and it just doesn't work to try to put commercial within that, you know, that type of a zoning. So that A1A and part of that South Patrick corridor really is our commercial, and it's a very finite amount of space. And there's not a lot of available land where you could say, you know, we can get some more commercial. There's a few pieces, and believe me, I work on those regularly trying to get something to stick there, the right thing to stick.
Well, I think before you can stick something additional, I see a lot of vacant commercial space. So,
Agreed.
So what's your role in working with the managers of those properties to, like, do you know what the occupancy rates are, or you know, how we can help close that gap? Because I'm sure there's tax benefits that come along with that.
Mm-hmm. The city has been pretty reluctant to provide any kind of tax benefits because, you know, that affects our revenue, and, you know, that's already.
No, I mean, the benefit is there's revenue coming in.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, gotcha. Where I can jump in and try to get I'll give you an example because I think it's far enough along in that process. Ace Hardware, they were looking to leave this, well, they are now leaving the city. I tried to get them where they're at Atlantic Plaza, they were in too small a space, and the people that run the plaza, which has a horrible occupancy rate right now, they're just very difficult to deal with. So they're losing tenants left and right. So they were trying to push him into a bigger space, make him pay more money for space that he didn't need. It was just too big for him. So I was trying to get him into the old post office location. Unfortunately, they just couldn't come to an agreement on terms, on the amount of money, and then fortunately I was able to get another business into that location that was also looking to expand, and I do my best to try to keep them in the area, which I was able to do. That's Dr. Yates and Dr. Calderon. They ended up buying the building across the street, so it worked out for them. But unfortunately, Ace, they just could not deal with the plaza, and the other locations just weren't a good fit for him, so ultimately I understand he's going to the old South Patrick Hardware. So I guess what I'm saying is my ear is always to the ground. I'm always listening for somebody that's looking to move or shuffle things around, looking at vacant properties, trying to marry them up with the right business. And so, I mean, I do that every day, trying to make those love connections.
Okay, thanks.
Is there a love connection for a bowling alley?
No, but I am talking to them fairly regularly, and
Same property?
not for a bowling alley, though, but the bowling alley property. Believe me, you're not the first and the last to say, where's the bowling alley?
I just have one or two maybe quick ones, and kind of on the back of what Ms. Birch was asking. And you said that the city had been reluctant to do things that would amount to incentives or anything like that for redevelopment or redevelopment of current existing things.
Taxes.
Sorry?
Specific to taxes, the tax incentive. Now, there's other,
What other type of things?
well, like the redevelopment agency, every year, we used to actually do a lot of facade grants, because this is, again, it was in the plan, and it was for the purpose of redevelopment, getting people to paint the building, pretty things up, because, you know, blight tends to create more blight, and the reverse of that is you start fixing your place up, and then hopefully your neighbors, they start doing the same thing, and that's what you're trying to do, is reverse that move towards blight and away from blight. So we have a facade grant program. So for a lot of years, we gave away multiple $50,000, up to $50,000 grants on a 2-to-1 match. And just about every one of these signs you see along A1A, those were paid almost entirely by the city. They were done through, generally it's a 50-50 match, but because of the way our comp plan was set up, everybody had to change their sign from a freestanding, a pole type sign, the old lollipop type, to a monument style. And I just could not see forcing a business to cut down a perfectly good sign in a down economy just to make it a smaller sign by the road. It just didn't make a lot of sense. So what I did, I was able to retool that into a facade grant program. So what came out of it was a very positive thing. Everybody got a new re-engineered sign. We changed our code to allow the sign to be retrofitted on site. So the bulk of the cost of those signs was in the pole and the footer. So if they were able to retrofit on the existing location, they were literally able to take the old lollipop off, slide a new cabinet down over it, and re-engineer it if it needed to be engineered. So, you know, what it did is it hardened a lot of these signs that were in really terrible shape once we started getting into it. So the facade grant program was used for that purpose, and then we retooled it to become more of a commercial facade grant. And I'm sure you're all familiar with the Sun on the Beach and the whole Shell Street redevelopment that happened. Well, that was a really cool project, and it was a satellite beach project, meaning the Shell Street, and adding the sewer, the storm drains, the restrooms, all that really cool stuff that's there. But at the same time, we also provided a facade grant to Mr. Allison, and for him to do the things that he did. So he was able to create those covered dining back areas, and we created this whole new buzz back there. where now it became a destination. So that's one of the ways that we would do these incentives, and we still have that out there. In fact, we have a facade grant that was approved that actually hasn't started. Well, it's kind of started. The Cinnamon and A1A, the old Curbs Plaza, which I don't know what it's called now. I think they used to call it Beachside Plaza. But that plaza there had Action Lock in it and a couple other different businesses. That was going under a complete redevelopment where he's going to be adding these columns and mansards and landscaping, a lot of really cool stuff. And part of that is he's going to create an anchor for a restaurant on the front end of it. So there's other things that we do. Just the tax incentive one is not one that's we're really looking to use.
There have been other ideas floated that you thought were good that the council disagreed?
No, I wouldn't think so. Not really. No. The council has been really supportive. Rarely do I actually come in front of the council with my tin cup out begging for money. Normally, when they set the budget, there's provisions in there to do certain things, like with the CRA budget, for facade grants and that kind of thing. And just like anything, you got to find out an amount of money, and you got to try to do everything. So I know if there's a little bit of money there, I'm going to try to find where I get the most bang for the buck as far as incentives and getting a business in here, or retaining a business, or trying to improve the curb appeal of that business.
I'm sure from what you said that you're really proactive about this, but is there a plan in place, or I don't really know the right terminology, I guess, but is there some proactive outreach to businesses and developers and that type of thing that, who don't exist in this area already, like on a state?
But you mean outside of this area?
Yeah.
Other than like the chamber, there's certainly a lot of local work being done. Where I work 24/7. When I'm out there, I'm talking city stuff regardless. But we also do this really cool business luncheon thing now up at Whiskey Beach. We do that every month, and it brings together all the businesses, not just Satellite Beach businesses, but the gentleman that owns it, Jerry Hebert. He's got like a dozen different businesses, and he's from South Florida and other areas, and he brings in a lot of business and developers from other areas, and so we get an opportunity to kind of chat and see if I can make some love connections.
And that's at luncheon?
No, it's usually after work on a third Thursday of every month.
Usually on the nights when we're having these meetings, right?
Yeah. Third Thursday at like 6 o'clock, I think it is.
We don't, there is one next Thursday.
Yeah, next week.
And we do not have a meeting next Thursday because we have it on Tuesday, so.
Do any other committee members have any other, this call? Anybody else?
Okay. So you mentioned about the building permits increasing this year. You think they might double. At that capacity, you think you can still keep up with that with the existing staff that you have?
With 2 people.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. What Carl can't handle, and I check with him regularly. Carl, you okay? You got this? You need me to jump in? So yeah, I watch it pretty close, and he lets me know when he's about ready to blow a gasket and he needs some help out there.
Okay. And if that were to steadily increase, then this could become a problem?
Say that one again?
If it increases past, like...
Well, there's always going to be a capacity point, but we're not close to that.
Okay.
So
you're still good?
Yeah, we are absolutely still good.
What about, have you guys thought about increasing the price on building permits?
We did that a couple years ago, and what I do is every few years I'll ask for building permits from around the city and all the cities in the county, and I look at everybody's, and I try to stay in the mean. I don't want to be. The problem is if you're the most expensive, you're probably the one that has the most people cheating and not getting building permits. So part of that strategy is keep them reasonable and issue them quickly. 24, 48 hours. it's almost a pleasure to come in and visit with our girls and get a building permit. And I'm just telling you, that's a quote that I've heard. So we have a lot of success with people getting permits and not kind of just doing it on the sly. And that's really important, because one of the things that we do is, we're out there verifying, and when somebody gets a permit, that they're licensed and they're insured. And honestly, if they're trouble people, then we deal with them at the same time. So we're really out there looking out for the public and doing that. So
That you're looking at it every couple of years, or what?
yeah, about every couple of years. And so right now, we're right there in the middle. We're not the cheapest, but, you can have one way or the other. You can be cheap and slow, or, we're in the middle. I would say, in fact, we are what they call SNAP approved. I don't know if I remember what the acronym stand for. We got certified through the EDC a couple of years ago. SNAP is Simple, Nimble, Accelerated Permitting. Yes. So that's a recognition done by EDC. And so, Jeff, kind of back to what you were saying, that SNAP certification is a certification of the EDC, who's out there recruiting worldwide for people to come to Broward County.
That's all I had. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have one there.
Here we go.
Totally different perspective, I know. I appreciate the city and the group and what they try to do to bring commercial business to the city. However, of all of these things that are being done, it doesn't really attract business. There's only so much the city can do financially and legally in order to attract business. The business itself has to see an opportunity. Mm-hmm. One of the problems we have is we don't have population density. And if a restaurant wants to move in here, for instance, now they have to compete with the 2 or 3 restaurants that do fairly well. Mm-hmm. And that's probably going to dilute them to some degree,
yeah.
and then them being able to pay their rent.
And we only got north-south. We don't have an east-west.
Pardon?
And we only have a north-south. We don't have an east-west.
And that's my point. So for me personally, as you well know, because I talked to you about it, Diane and I tried to rent a space in that shopping center.
Yeah, didn't work.
And no, it didn't even come close to working, simply because it was 3,000 feet. He was asking for a humongous amount of money. Mm-hmm. The lease was 55 pages long, as opposed to a standard commercial lease in this state that's 18 pages. Mm-hmm. Has you locked down every which way. You can't breathe without some kind of a violation. And he insists on getting that rent that he insists on, and you're going to hear this, you'll
yeah.
see this.
And it was triple net too, wasn't it?
Even though the property has been vacant for 3 years, he's telling me it's on the beach, it demands this rate of return. Mm-hmm. So finally we said adios, and we went to Merritt Island and found a great opportunity there for less money, for twice the space, and suits our needs. That opportunity to fit our needs should have happened in Satellite Beach. And if we can't make that happen in Satellite Beach, I think we're spinning our wheels trying to attract business that really doesn't have it. There's no traction.
Well, as far as density, we can't increase density. That's in our charter. But I will say that we have a tremendous amount of growth. Just like touch on a few. First off, you got a 108-unit Oceana that is about ready. The south building, the clubhouse, is about ready to get CO'd within the next 3 months. That's 75. No, I'm sorry, it's 54. Excuse me. So it's one of the buildings. You have up at Pelican Coast, which was purchased almost a year ago now. They are getting really close to coming in with plans and showing us what they're going to do. That's 398 units that it's going to go, up to. I don't know what they're actually going to do. 398 units. Right next to that, the prior phase is 150 townhomes. That's 25 sixplexes. They were sold out before they even turned dirt. So there's a lot of population. I want to call it density. I mean, it kind of is, but it's not increase in density. It's density that was already approved and allocated, like back in 2002 for most of that. So I think you're going to start seeing more population as a result of it on the north end of the city because of some of the growth up there.
I don't disagree with that at all.
And that doesn't even touch the 100 acres on the south side that it's allocated for, I think, like 510 residential units.
But the reality is, we're not likely to see anything happen with that for
No.
Not for
that's
some
minimum
time.
3 years out before you.
Well, probably longer than that.
I'm just making a point
Yeah.
that what we're talking about today and doing the work today might have a return on investment in 3 to 5 to 7 years.
Agreed.
There's nothing that we can talk to in the next 3 years that goes into the funding of the city.
Yeah.
So, or I should say, assisting with businesses.
Mhm.
This whole thing about taxes, you can only do so much, even if you gave tax incentives. I mean, I don't know what the return
Yeah.
would be.
And
Okay?
actually, yeah, that's a good point, Larry, is that, you know, I think a lot of people have a misconception of the power and authority of local government. You know, that we can stop development, we can encourage redevelopment. You know, we can certainly incentivize best we can. At the end of the day, we just got to show that our doors are open, that we're a place you want to be. And I think, you know, us setting aside 40% of our ocean front in conservation and some of the direction we're going with sustainability and resiliency, I think we're doing things that put that message out there that we are the place you want to be.
In contrast, and I know this is not an example of Satellite Beach, but I'm just saying, in contrast, if you go to New York City, Manhattan, and you try to open a business, let's say you want to open a stamp store, I'm just making this up, okay? So what do you have in the back? You have a bathroom, a toilet, and a sink. The monthly water bill for that place is $5,000.
Wow.
That's just the water bill. I'm not talking about rent or taxes or anything else. It's just the water bill. Because of the population density, these people will pay it because they know they're going to get a return. They're busy from the time they open till the time they close.
Wow.
You can't offer that kind of an opportunity, so the opportunities have to go in different directions. What does a community have to offer? You have to offer culture, schools, beautiful
Agreed.
environment,
Yeah.
so that they want to open and they want to have some people that work there that enjoy that kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Now, one thing we did a couple years ago, and it was kind of modeled after New York and some of the areas up in the cities, was we allowed for mixed use. We actually had a provision in our code that was for the area south of Jackson, west of A1A, east of South Patrick Drive, and north of Park. In that little area, you could do mixed use.
Right.
And you could only do it on top of your existing building.
Right.
Well,
people
in
were
5 years,
clamoring to get
we
it.
had that many people that took advantage of that. Okay, that didn't work. So what we did is we retooled that and basically said, you know, by right, if you have a commercial property, you can do mixed use automatically out of the gate. And no matter how big that commercial building is, you can do a minimum of 2. The density is 7 units an acre. So, I mean, you know, the residential can't be any larger than the commercial, but it could be on top, could be behind it, and it gave them a lot more flexibility on how they went about creating that mixed use. And because you're sharing the parking, there's value in that mixed use. And the idea was that if, you know, the commercial component on the first floor was a little bit slow, you still had that rent coming in. And so with that rent coming in, you know, you still could keep that building looking nice and presentable. And we've had several people already take advantage of that, and we have others that are interested in doing it. And so we have some big plans for the whole mixed-use concept to really expand on that.
I have no doubt about that. It's the only thing, not the only thing, but one of the things we have to look at is outcomes. All these things sound intuitively correct. They've been proven in other communities. But if you do A, B, and C, and for 5 years you get nothing for it, then there's no outcome. Then why did you do this?
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying. And maybe the strategy needs to go in a different direction.
Well, you know, somebody once said, every time I failed, I got that much smarter, or something like that. And, yeah, we realized quite a few things out of that. One is just doing it like this,
Right.
it was just about it. But, you know, it was a way to baby step into the idea of mixed use. Now, maybe we should have done something in shorter than 5 years, make some change, but unfortunately, wheels of government moves slow.
That's history. It's
Yeah.
like, what do we do from today going
Yeah.
forward?
And we
What
got
did we
good
learn
stuff
from
going on.
yesterday to apply to tomorrow?
Yeah.
That's all. Going back and criticizing what happened 3 years ago is useless, unless you refuse to learn.
Well, I remember what it was. By every failure, I become one step closer to success.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's obviously. Absolutely, 100%, yes. Because it's just all part of the chain of how you get there.
Yeah. Good conversation, Larry.
So how many other-
Yeah, you enjoyed it? You want to continue? I have to go.
Do we have any other questions for Mr. Stone?
I have one right here. Actually, two now, but the mixed use thing, you know, I'm a personal friend of Mr. Allison's. And I know his original plan up there at the end of Cinnamon was to put some apartments on top of that.
Yeah.
The story he told me was that he couldn't get enough apartments in there because of the density requirement to make it viable. So that's what my question before about, do you ever suggest things back to rezone things to accommodate
We did. There
people
was-
who are trying to
yeah.
develop along the way?
There was actually several issues, but that, you're right, that was one of them. However, you know, part of it was because Dave's business model is one bedroom, one bath. You know, that's just what works for him.
I suggested he build a little, my second question, hotel motel space, so.
Which he could have, but he could have also, because remember, whatever he's got in that footprint, he could have went straight up and he could have done residential. So he could have done, and I think he was like maybe 2 off from what he wanted to do. But, you know, he wanted a bunch of small 1-bedroom, 1-baths, where he could have done a couple 2-bedrooms, or maybe 1 3-bedroom, and then these 1-bedrooms. So it just wasn't, it didn't make sense financially based on the model that he's had a lot of success with. But, you know, there was a bigger problem. That one I think he would have lived with. The bigger problem is the impact fees, which we have no control over. That's all done at the county. There were several $100,000 worth of impact fees that, you know, we made phone calls. We tried to get them to consider waiving them, and we got nowhere.
So the other part of this, what is our feeling on hotel motel space to bring tourists here and keep them overnight or keep them for a couple of days?
Well, we had changed our code not long ago for like the Peg Ledge properties. When we started that, we had that boutique hotel. It was under contract, and they were going to build, it's 3 stories. The first floor, the Peg Legs was going to be under building parking with a small restaurant that would serve the hotel component of it. So the second floor was going to be 25 higher-end business traveler type of hotel rooms, you know, with like an executive office suite in it, that kind of thing, and a pool. And the third floor was going to be 7 residential townhome units, and it was going to be a net zero building. I mean, really cool concept. The problem with that particular concept was the people that had put the contract on it didn't do a pro forma, and at the end of the day, it financially just didn't make sense, and so that contract went away. But the boutique hotel code was already changed, so that again was us saying our doors are open, come talk to us, and it doesn't have to be on that site. You know, one of the things that you're somewhat limited to on the west side of A1A is you only got 35 feet, and trying to squeeze 3 floors in it was pretty tough. And this one here, I mean, it had a vegetated roof and solar panels and EV charging stations. I mean, some cool stuff. So, yes, we are open to it. We changed our comp plan about 2 years ago now that allowed for hotels. And we stopped short of actually changing our code because we didn't know, part of changing the code is not just saying, yes, you can do it, but yes, you can do it, and here's how you do it. You know, the development requirements, you know, how many parking stalls, how many this, how many that. So without really having a developer telling us what they wanted, we didn't want to start creating rules that may contravene what they wanted. So we fixed what we knew we could fix that would generically work for any hotel, and that was the comp plan, the policy. And then basically wait, because it only takes 30 to 60 days to really get the code changed, but then we can have the conversations with that developer to say, what is it you want? And then, you know, we'll look at it, of course. It may not be exactly what they want, but if it makes sense, then we'll put it in an ordinance, send it to council, let them talk about it, have 2 public meetings, you know, get a lot of input from the public, and hopefully get it through or make whatever change necessary to get it through. So we're absolutely open to it.
May I ask one more thing? Sorry. I know on the original plat maps from the beginning, there was a 30-foot, I think, easement that ran alleyways between the first block, between A1A and through the woods and through Cassia and Oak Ocean. like ABC did.
Like Allison's property,
What's that?
like Dave Allison's property.
That one has an easement there,
Yeah.
where a guy's parking his boat, I think, right now,
Yeah.
but like they did behind the ABC. with
Yeah.
that alleyway.
Mhm,
Have we ever thought about maybe taking those easements and making it more walkable around in that area?
Most of those have been vacated and now are part of people's property. An example of that is Dave Allison's property. And the boat you referred to is actually the neighbors, because when you vacate a right-of-way, the assumption is you got two properties, and that right-of-way is going along that property line, so that right-of-way took a part of each property, and so therefore, when you vacate a right-of-way, you give back half of it to each. So Mr. Allison got half of that, and the neighbor to the west got half of it. Neighbor to the west parks their boat on their half. Dave fenced off his.
What about the other blocks?
Well, Dave bought the building to the north now, on the other side, that plaza we just talked about. And that building is already in that easement, so that's what I'm saying. That right-of-way is vacated and pretty much gone everywhere. You know, if you look at the houses, they're sometimes in it or right on it, and it would just create greater nonconformities.
Commercial zone is so small up there on that.
They are.
We could improve.
Well, one of the things we try to encourage people to do is if they, and actually, again, Dave Allison, he did this, is we encourage people to, if they own a piece of commercial property, try to buy the property to the west of them, to give them a little bit more property. Well, Dave did do that. He bought that little house that was for sale in behind his on Cinnamon. And there's been other examples of that, but that's one of the more recent ones.
Thank you, Mr. Stone.
Mhm.
All right. There's a notation on the agenda right after this, discuss value connection risk analysis tool. I think it turns out we don't actually have that, and so we're skipping that over tonight.
Yeah, we're gonna email you like we have in the past, those tables, those charts. We'll email them to probably tomorrow. They're ready to go. But again, since we haven't really been filling them out, they're really just a tool that's optional for you to use, if you so choose.
Did you produce the combined?
And I have that too. I didn't bring it with me, but I can email that out to you. No, because it was just, I think we had, like I said, we had maybe 4 filled out the first round of presentations, and 2 or 3 filled out the second round.
I think I misunderstood that was some sort of homework or something.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's initially how it was presented, it's homework, take this list of responsibilities for each department, and, compare them to the city values, and talk about it, and use that as a tool for discussion when we come back. But, it's the group's decision as to how they need, what tools you need to use to get the job done. So, short answer is, I can email them to everybody if you just want to see what people put together.
By the way, Suzanne, what I did is, on this sheet, I don't know if they have the highlighted version, but I also put a number.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that somewhat ties into those pilot council goals. At least to give you a starting point to look at.
Okay, so to the next presentation from the police department then, and let's go ahead and have, is there any, sorry?
Public comment after the discussion?
You have something to add? Did you look at the clock? I thought that's
I thought somebody was asking about doing the break, I'm sorry.
Oh.
Well, that's
I said, don't get public comment on it.
Yeah, that's what I had. I had that same question, Cindy.
We're going to, that's going to be next.
Okay, sorry.
But I thought you were making some indication about the time.
No, I thought I was hearing someone ask about taking the break now, because it's 7 before we get to the next presentation, but I'm not recommending that necessarily, so.
Isn't it usually 7:30? Okay. So if anybody has any public comment before the police department. All right then, looking forward to hearing from Chief Pearson. And again, we'll, take notes and things like that, and then at the end, we'll go around the table and have questions.
I don't know if this is working or not, but just in case. Well, I tell you, I always knew John was a wealth of information, but I learned a lot from that, actually, not the least of which was to never switch with him and allow him to go first. But anyway, here we are. You all have the stuff in front of you. There's a lot of information on there. Normally, when I would produce a PowerPoint for a presentation, I would not have this much information because they're difficult to read. But knowing the circumstances, the PowerPoint there, plus you have a copy of it at your desk, I felt it was okay to put a bunch of information on the individual slides. A lot of this stuff we're going to just touch on, but I'm going to kind of fill in the blanks with the different things as we go, so that it's a combination of what you see here and then kind of expounding on some of it, so that I'm just not standing here reading a PowerPoint to you when, you know, you can all read. And I also like to start with the police department. You know, everybody knows what a police department does, right? For the most part, right? For preservation of life and property, respond to calls, protect people, you know, investigate crimes, those kind of things. So what I did was focus more on the different things that we do, because, well, anybody could know nothing about the Satellite Beach Police Department. They would generally know what we do because we're a police department. But what I think the biggest issue that I have found is that we do a lot more things than people realize. So I would like to focus on those things. So that's kind of how I see this presentation going, if that's okay. I will start by saying, though, that I do appreciate the opportunity to come here. Honestly, any opportunity I get to talk to anybody about the police department, about what we do, and about the outstanding men and women that we have, I enjoy it. So I'm not just giving you lip service because, you know, the boss is sitting here. I really do like to come out and talk to people and answer questions and things about what we do, just because I'm very proud of it and the people that we have. You can see on the first page, it talks about the Excelsior Award. That's a big deal. In the fact that we are the very first police agency in all of Brevard County to be accredited. We're also the very first police agency to get the Excelsior status. And very quickly, what that means is simply every 3 years, the accreditation team, if you will, comes in and goes over every single one of your policies, all 276 policies, everything. They look at everything. They start in the morning, 3 straight days, nonstop, eat lunch while they're working, you know, that kind of thing. And you have to have, for all three years, for your accreditation review, has to be flawless. Meaning there's no, hey, you know, this is pretty good, but you need to fix it, so just let us know it's fixed and we'll come back and check it and then you're good. That's not flawless. So you have to have 5 consecutive accreditation cycles, which is obviously 15 years, right? And have them all flawless to get to Excelsior status. So we are the first agency in Brevard County to achieve that. And actually this August, in just a few months, just a few weeks actually, we were going for our 2nd consecutive Excelsior status. So that is what that means. And the general point of that is the fact that, which you can see on the next page, it really just, it gives everybody the comfort to know that what we're doing is all best practices throughout the state of Florida. So we're not just deciding that, hey, you know what, Satellite Beach decides we're going to do things this way because we just feel like it or because it's my whim or whatever. All of these things are reviewed consistently, always, and making sure that they're best practices and constantly updated. And that's, not only is that a benefit for the community for obvious reasons, but it's a benefit for the employees because they know that their policy manual, they know what they can do, they know what they can't do, they know if they do this, this is what's going to happen, if it's good or bad. And it's a comfort, because I think when you work for a place where you know exactly what to expect, here it is. It's pretty simple. There's no fluctuation. So that's that. We don't really generate revenue, so there's not really anything for me to discuss there. Now, of course, your first thought is, well, you write tickets, there's revenue. But the revenue is so incredibly small from those tickets that it's you know, you hate to talk about money at all and minimize it, but it's just so small, it's not even really worth getting into because it just doesn't fund anything. Honestly, I don't even know what it is because it just doesn't really account for a whole lot. She has an idea, I'm sure, and I'm sure she budgets for something, but it's just one of those misconceptions that, you know, that tickets generate revenue. And the last I checked, you know, a standard moving violation, I think the city would get like $11 or something. I mean, and when you look a little bit later and you see the amount of tickets that we actually write, and you do quick math, you realize that it's not a whole lot of money. So that's why I didn't really spend a whole lot of time on revenue. You can see, I put in the PowerPoint at the very top, I put the city value number, and then what the words are. Obviously, I'm not going to go over all those. You can see all that, and I understand you're going to do that later, but I did want to include that just so that you had an idea of kind of where I felt like the stuff I was talking about, where it fell in with the values with the city. You can see the different things that we do as far as applying for grants, and oh, I'm sorry, I thought somebody was clicking it for me. Oh, thanks. Yeah. Well, yeah. So there you'll see some of the things that we do. I wanted to I did not want to inundate you with stats. I think some of them were kind of important. So again, I'm not going to go over each one of these because you can read, and most everything is self-explanatory. One of the things I do like to mention right off the bat, especially for people that aren't intimately familiar with our agency, because I'll have people all the time, still to this day, they will say, hey, how many police officers do you have at Satellite Beach? So we will say, we're 21 sworn. So what I didn't realize for years and years is that gave people the misconception that there's 21 people driving around in police cars, answering calls, stopping cars, and responding to things. The 21 sworn is an industry term that talks about the total amount of people in the agency that have the ability to affect an arrest, that are actually sworn, certified kind of thing. But that includes me all the way down. So when you say I'm 21 sworn, well, you take me out, you take the operations commander and the detective commander out, the 2 detectives out, the 2 school resource officers out. What you actually have is 14 police officers driving around in police cars responding to calls and things like that. So I just want to make that clear, because a lot of times I will get that all the time, that people think, well, 21. Now, yes, if it's during the day and everybody happens to be available and it's a major incident, well then yes, we could mobilize 7 people possibly. But that same incident happens at 2 in the morning, we're mobilizing 2. So there's a fluctuation, but we're going to get that a little bit later. The only thing on this next page that I would like to point out is that there was a philosophy change when I started. Satellite Beach has a reputation. We all know that. We talk about it all the time, and I like it. I'm good with it. We earned it, and the people that live here like it, because the reputation is don't speed in Satellite Beach, don't drink and drive, all those kind of things. It's the gauntlet, and that's wonderful. I don't want you speeding into my city, and I don't want you drinking and driving in my city. I live here. My family lives here. My kids live here. Well, used to. They're kind of doing the college thing now. So that's a good thing. But the difference, though, that I wanted, the change that I wanted to make when I took over the leadership position here, was that I think you can do that without just writing tickets. So for the first time in really, I think, the history of Satellite Beach, a couple years after I started, we write more warnings than we do traffic tickets. So we make a lot of traffic stops. So and just to give you a quick number, you see there's 4,678 traffic stops in 2017. So if you take away the verbal warnings and the written warnings and look at the actual tickets, then you have less than a 30% chance of actually getting a ticket if you're stopped in Satellite Beach. And the reason that we do that is because the purpose of a traffic stop is twofold. One, it's crime prevention. There is absolutely no other thing anywhere out there, and I would defy anybody to find one, because if you do find it, no one's seen it, and I want to know what it is. There's nothing better at crime deterrent than a traffic stop. And you think, well, you stopped me because I have a headlight out, how's that deterring crime? It's the people around. If you're a bad guy, or bad person, and just use that generically, if you're a bad guy and you're driving around to commit a crime or looking to steal something or do some harm, and as you're driving down, you see a police car over here with the lights on, another police car over here with lights on, then you turn down a neighborhood, you see a police car parked in someone's driveway, then you go up to the plaza and you see a police car in there because someone's, you're going someplace else. I mean, you're just not going to do it here. You go down the street and you look around, you don't see anything anywhere, and you drive around for 20 minutes and don't see anything, that's where you're going to commit your crime. And that's a proven fact. But the philosophy change was, we can accomplish that traffic safety, we can accomplish the security of crime prevention. And we can also, which is prong 2 of a traffic stop, is modified behavior. And there's a lot of ways to do it without just a traffic ticket. And it seems to work very, very well. So that's just a little change in, again, the things, I'm trying to point out the things that are different that maybe people that aren't intimately familiar with the agency might not realize. Again, on the next page, you can just see a whole bunch of different stuff. There's so much more that happens here in Satellite Beach than people know. And it's, while I absolutely love it when someone says, oh man, nothing happens in Satellite Beach, that's like Mayberry. I love it because obviously they feel safe and they like that, but on the other hand, it bothers me because that builds complacency and people don't realize that there are a lot more things that go on here than people realize. So I want people to protect themselves. I want them to lock doors. I want them to lock their car. I want them to look around and be aware of their surroundings, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So therefore, I wanted to put some of these things up there just, again, for you to look at. I don't need to go over each and every one of these. If during your perusal you see something that you have a question on, we can obviously discuss those in detail a little bit later. You can see on the next page, we're talking about community assistance in identifying crime suspects, drug detection kits, internal affairs investigation, all the different things that we do. The training is significant. Most of it is mandatory. However, we have a very unique circumstance that I think is very, very positive to Satellite Beach, that I get calls on quite often when people find out how our schedule works. Because the way our schedule works, and I'm not going to bore you with the details, but we have Fridays are our overlap day, where both squads are working. Basically, everybody, all 14 people-ish, are working on every Friday. So that enables us then to 2 Fridays a month to do training, where people are working and there's no overtime involved. So twice a month, every month, we do 10 hours of training. That's significant. And there's no extra cost, and there's no shortage of the road. It's really a perfect circumstance. So because of our patrol schedule is so good, because it's positive morale, we get the most out of the employee because we work 10-hour shifts. Everything you read in virtually anything, but particularly in police work, is much past 10 hours, people are useless. They really are. I mean, especially in police work when it's just, all the time, condition red, condition red. So I think 10-hour shifts works perfect. By the time people start to get to the end of their rope, it's time to go home, and that's perfect. So, at the very end, it talks about the different agencies that we work with. Again, you can see all those. You can, common sense would tell you what all those do. I would just add, though, that the relationship that we have with the sheriff's office and our surrounding neighbors, and really everybody in the county, is very unique, because it's so good that I could pick up the phone and call any police chief or the sheriff right this minute from my cell phone and get virtually anything I need resource-wise, and vice versa. And it makes a big difference for a community, because in a nutshell, I have, in essence, the entire resources of the sheriff's office, again, I'm generalizing to make a point, at my disposal. Therefore, I don't have to go out with city money and buy all of the different things that I don't necessarily need on a daily basis. I'm not going to borrow patrol cars from them, right? But there's a lot of things that the sheriff's department has that they would use more often that I'm going to use once a year. Why would I want to spend money to buy it when I can just use theirs? Now, there's certain things that if you need it in an emergency, even though it's only once a year, you might have to have one. But again, I don't want to get too in the weeds, but generally that's the purpose of forging and maintaining those really solid relationships. And then you can see on the next page, it just really goes through a lot of the different things that we do. Again, you're talking about domestic disputes and crime scenes and evidence collection and all of those things. The big thing now is, and it's funny because it's the big thing for the last few years in the country, but it's been a big thing for us since the late 90s, is school security. And we have been proactive and doing things differently and been able to respond to the active shooter since the late 90s. long before anybody was doing that. We were the first and still the only beachside agency to have an ERT team, an emergency response team. We have been training in the schools and training for active shooter drills routinely since the late 90s, when the council was able to give the police department back then a $50,000 grant, if you will, to start up this emergency response team, to have the proper weapons and the proper tools to be able to respond to, God forbid, a situation like that. Therefore, we've been doing it for a long time, and every summer, during the summer months, we go in and train in all of the different schools, actually in the schools, so that we know what they look like, so we're not, and we have the ability, because everyone is outfitted properly, to respond. And if there's only one person on the road at that moment, and they get a situation like that, they're going to respond, and they're going to go in and take care of it, whether there's one or three. They're all prepared and equipped and trained to be able to do that, and that's been going on for a long time. And now we're getting calls from people saying, hey, I understand you're doing this. Can I look at your policy? Can I see your training? And they go, wow, I see that you've been doing this, since the 90s. Well, again, just some of the proactive things that we do. We also started, and the last thing on this that has taken off that a lot of people are doing is, unless there's some other agency doing it that I'm just not sure of, fire drills was a big area of concern for children, because what would happen is you pull a fire alarm, right, or they have a fire drill or an alarm is pulled. What's the first thing everybody does? You all remember from school, right? What do? Exactly right. It's exactly right. You stand up, you line up, you walk out, and everybody parades outside, right? Well, you talk to these kids, and that's when they're the scaredest. In 50 years, in the last 50 years, anybody know how many people have died in a school fire? And how many people died in a school fire in 50 years? Zero. Not one. Not a single person. But yet we train to get up and single file walk out. Well, now you're sitting duck. So what we have done is for the safety and security of the people, is we mobilize every single person working, which during the day, like I said, is detectives, me, admin, anybody that's working. Everybody goes to that school, whether it's a planned alarm, a false alarm, a fake alarm, some kid trying to get out a test, whatever, and we surround the school with police officers just to sit there while they do their thing and check the school and then put everybody back in. And the feedback has been incredible. It's been incredible. Another proactive response. Now everybody's doing it, if you will. So those are the things that just, I think, make us a little different and separate us a little bit that I like to talk about. Again, you can go through all those on that page and see all the different things, everything in there that we do, and there's just so much to do and accomplish. And the very next page, you'll see that you have all the way down to the Police Athletic League, and that we're involved with the Police Athletic League. Our school resource officer at Satellite High School is part of the Police Athletic League, and he not only coaches and mentors and all that, but that's just another avenue for building relationships within the community. The school resource officers are constantly with these kids building relationships. They go into the classrooms, they teach, and then they have the PAL, which is a whole separate thing that's also building with the community that our school resource officer does. And it's just been an outstanding relationship, and it helps with, we have 4 schools in this city, 4 public schools, and we have, I think, 6, last I checked, 6 other schools in this city, 6 where kids go, whether it's Montessori or church schools or whatever. There's a lot of kids in this school during the day, during school time. Therefore, the relationship between children and police has got to be important, and it's got to be built, and it's got to be cultivated, and we try to go and use as many different avenues as we can to do that. The one thing I wanted to mention about the patrol division before I put my finishing touches on it is that really our only issue that we have, our only issue is we do an awful lot, the people we have. We only have, like I said, 21 sworn people and 5 administrative staff. And with those 5 administrative staff, they're all cross-trained. So virtually everybody in the building can do almost everybody else's job. Both of our records people can go into dispatch instantly. We have a hurricane or something going on, and records is closed because there's a hurricane coming. Well, that doesn't render them not usable. They can go in and dispatch. My record supervisor is cross-trained to be the backup to our evidence. Our evidence person is also our crime scene analyst. And I could go on and on and on. There's a lot that gets done with a small amount of people. And on the patrol, we do the same thing. In the police department, we do all those things that you saw with the people that we have. And that's a lot. Really, our only issue is that we only have 3 people. 3 people is minimum staffing. That's absolute bare minimum. That's it. You really shouldn't go below that. It's dangerous. 3 people. We only have 3 people working 50% of the time. That's it. 50% of any day, 50% of any week, 50% of any month, a year, 3 people working. The other 50% of the time, we only have 2. Now, if you think about every traffic stop, somebody needs to go and back that person up. An arrest requires 2 people. You can't send someone back to the police department with a suspect under arrest where they're in a room locked up with no weapon by themselves. It's just, you can do it, I guess, but it's just not best practices and it's not safe. So if you have 2 people working and an arrest is made, which takes the average of a couple hours, and that's not even if you're counting transport, there's nobody in the road. So while we maintain those relationships for backup, that's really our biggest issue is a personnel issue. But we're working on that going forward, and what we do with what we have is pretty special. And those relationships then with the other agencies to come in and back us up, should we need it, is good. So that way we can make sure that everybody's covered. And we have 6 dispatchers, and if you go back and look at the amount of calls that they take, our dispatch, it mentions in there, we have to answer 90% of the calls within 10 seconds, and we're at over 95% of the calls within 10 seconds. And we have, again, about 60% of the time we have 2 dispatchers, and about 40% of the time we have 1. And we really accomplish a lot and do a lot and protect a lot of people with what we have. That was a very quick overview. Again, there's a lot of information in there, but I didn't want to spend a lot of time talking about stuff that maybe you weren't interested in, and I'd rather have it more time if there's any questions that people have. So I'm available if anybody has any questions.
Can you just talk about the last slide a little bit, the volunteer program?
I can. Yep. The volunteer program is it's pretty spectacular, actually. As a matter of fact, I believe we're still the only law enforcement agency that has an all-volunteer marine patrol. We have a police boat, and the police boat goes out regularly with all volunteers to protect the canals and to keep an eye on all waterway areas. Because it's not really fair, if you think about it, that I live on the water, so only 50% of my house is protected to people that can drive by on the street. So we go routinely, virtually daily, on the boat to patrol the canals and Sampson's Island. And as you can see, we have 60 volunteers that we manage with that small group of people that I told you. And the flagship program, if you will, for the volunteer program is a Stop By and Say Hi program. We visit almost 100 residents now, 100 different people that we visit for social visits. And you say, well, social visit, what's that accomplishing? Well, if you're elderly, if you're a shut-in, if you're a sick person, or you just don't have any family, you might not be any of those things, maybe you're just alone. Your family lives out of the area and you're by yourself. Well, that's just an often forgotten aspect of the community health program that you heard so much from the fire department about. Well, there's a lot of those things that they do, and it's wonderful. It really is. That program is outstanding, the community medic. But there's a whole section of people's well-being that really wasn't being addressed, and that's the social well-being. I couldn't tell you how many times we have saved someone from becoming a victim just by sitting there talking to them or keeping them plugged into the community. Maybe they're not too computer savvy, so we talk about all the programs that we have. We talk about what the city can do. We talk about what the rec department does. All of these things that people get in person, along with the fact of having somebody to talk to. And, I mean, they talk about, my grandkid's birthday, and I got to tell you what I bought them, and I want to show you this. I mean, they love that. So there's a lot of those things that we do that the volunteers do. And the last, I think it was $150,000 on average. If you take what the amount of money that the average person would be paid to do of the volunteer work, if they were actually on the payroll, and you take all the hours that they volunteer, it saves the city about $150,000 is what they do. And you can see, again, some of those are relatively self-explanatory, but the house check one is another one that people love. You live in Satellite Beach and you go on vacation, you stop in the station and you fill out a brief little cards, because we have to have some information. There's a police car that drives by your house with a volunteer that gets out and walks around. They don't just drive by and look and go, yep, it's not on fire, and keep driving. They get out, they look around, they shake doors a couple, 2, 3 times a week while you're gone. Not only is the protection of that you're getting, but again, what is that showing everybody else? Driving down the street, they go, hey, aren't the Smiths gone? Well, yeah, well, how come there's a police car there? Oh, they're checking on their house. Well, I'm going to somebody else's vacant house to burglarize it. And there's just a ton of things that volunteer program does. I could spend an hour just on the stop by and say hi and the benefits of that and all the other programs. So, yes, thank you for the opportunity to mention that.
Are we going around the table again, or is it just, well?
We're going to go around the table today and take questions now.
Okay.
Start with
Oh, okay. So, Chief Patterson, thank you for your service to the city. And how long have you worked for us, the city?
I'm in my 32nd year.
Wow, that's impressive. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And forgive me if I repeat, I'm very low vision, so I really couldn't see your presentation. So if there's things that I'm...
That's all right.
Let's see. Sorry. Can't read my own writing either. What would you say is the ratio of basic crimes versus, say, neighborhood disputes on what your officers respond to?
The ratio of crime to...
Like criminal crime, I didn't see your slides, but
Well,
the difference between arresting somebody as a criminal and taking care of noise.
I'm not sure how to answer
How much
that.
time do your officers spend on actual crime versus a neighborhood dispute, say, between the neighbors?
Well, we kind of look at them both the same, because a neighborhood dispute could turn into a crime if it's not handled properly. So we kind of like to consider, unless it's proactive patrol, meaning I'm in a car driving around in the city looking for problems, violations, issues, anything, just proactive patrol. All the rest of the time would be. Now, we average, if you wanted to break it down percentage-wise, probably 60% of our time is handling the generic of disputes, crimes, investigations, traffic stops. And I'd say probably 30 to maybe 40% of the time is administrative duties, report writing, and various administrative tasks. Yeah.
Okay, good. How about, you talked about training, that your officers do a lot of training. Can you give me an idea of what kind of training is that, like SWAT training, or do you guys do any sensitivity training on how to deal with the public?
Oh, yeah. We do all of that. Well, a lot of that is mandated by the state anyway. I mentioned we have when I was talking about training, I first mentioned that a lot of it is state mandated. And racial profiling and all those kind of things, along with that type of training that you mentioned, is all stuff that's done on a routine basis. A lot of it by the state, a lot of it just because we're proactive and we want to make sure that we get that done. Probably the best example of the training philosophy to generalize it would be, my philosophy is, when it comes to training, is when you have a high-risk, low-frequency event, that's where you're going to get in trouble. And that's very, very important. So we train a lot for high-risk, low-frequency. And the reason is, I would rather spend a lot of time training for something that never happens than to not train for something, have it happen, and not be able to respond to it. Active shooter would be an example of very, very high risk, very, very low frequency, but we train on it a lot. And that would be an example of training.
I think I have at least one other question. It has to do with how many female officers do you have on your force, and do you have plans to hire any more, or we had a hiring freeze?
Well, we don't have any current open budgeted positions right now, and we have two women. Yeah, the school resource officer, Delora, and our,
One of those is resource.
right,
Okay.
right,
And the other is?
detective,
The female, or the dog?
detective.
Canine?
No, that's right, we have three. Yeah.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
I knew I was forgetting somebody. Two wanted to come out, and I'm going, you know why? Because I just gave her the dog, so she went to a different position, so I was thinking about the patrol, yeah. Yeah, she's our canine officer, so yeah, we have three.
And then the detective, which is actually the county?
No, she's just one of our two detectives. So we have an SRO, our canine officer, and a detective, are women.
And do you have the figures on exactly, or this probably in someone's paperwork somewhere, the expenditures that are associated with Just a Volunteer program as far as, is anything broken down as far as insurance and stuff, as far as, vehicles they drive around in? Any expenditures associated with Just the Volunteer program?
The total expenditure of the volunteer program is just under $6,000. That's for operations, equipment, and all that. That's for everything, for everybody. Yeah, that's for everything. Now, there's a few things that are not included in there I'm sorry? Yes. Yeah, annually. The few things that are not included in there that I don't have broken down would be like fuel. They fill up the car to do the Stop by and Save program and do house checks, but I don't know, it's maybe a tank of every 10 days, because they go someplace, they stop, and they're there for 2 hours. Then they go someplace else, they stop, and they're there for 2 hours. So, yes, the budgeted money for supplies and things is just under $6,000.
Great. I think, will we have a chance if I come up with something else to?
Yeah, we'll go around.
I think that's it for me. Thank you.
All right. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Appreciate you saying that.
This evening.
Now, before we move to this call, we typically did have a break at 7:30. If the committee's okay with it, we could push that till after we finish with Commissioner Chief Pearson. Okay. Ms. Call?
Okay. I do not have the numbers in front of me because I forgot, but I believe last year, there was some overtime in your department. Could you explain that?
Sure. Like the total amount or the
Just
break?
in general, if you happen to know what most of it was used for.
Almost the lion's share of it is for backfilling spots.
Okay.
Again, because when you're at a skeleton crew, yeah, based on what I was saying earlier, when you have minimum staffing, and let's say it's of the 50% of the time where there's two people working, somebody calls in sick, you can't have one person work the whole city. So therefore, the lion's share of overtime is definitely backfilling positions for someone goes out on FMLA, someone gets sick, someone takes vacation. Any one of those things that happen have to get backfilled. Because unfortunately, we don't have the kind of job where, if my administrative assistant calls in sick on a Tuesday, well, all of the work that she was supposed to do on Tuesday is just sitting there for her when she gets there on Wednesday. So now she's got Tuesdays and Wednesdays work to get caught up. But unfortunately, in police work, we can't do that. So we have to have people out there. And, yes, so the answer to your question is our budget overtime is roughly $75,000 a year, and it's mostly used for that. But there's court time, there's late arrests. There's certainly other things that go in there. But.
Okay, and how are you doing so far with that for this year? Are you on target to that, or are you
No.
going to exceed
No,
it?
we're going to exceed it.
You're going to exceed it.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure we already have.
Okay.
But,
To add to that?
Yeah, I want to make a comment to that, and this goes with everybody, especially with the police and fire, because a lot of times, especially last year, total overtime that you were looking at, a lot of that had to do with the hurricane. But also, when their overtime goes up, their salaries will go down, because you're not paying him as an overtime. So what the person was making, if, let's say they're on leave or something, you're not paying that person anymore, you're paying the overtime. So normally you can fluctuate.
But an overtime is that time and a half versus a salary.
It is, but I'm just saying, you're not, if you budgeted $600,000 in salaries and you budgeted $75,000 in overtime, and and let's say you spend $100,000 on overtime, I can reduce that $600,000 by $25,000.
Well, that would be if someone leaves.
Right.
Right, yeah, that would,
You mean if there's an open position?
right,
Right.
right.
Not if they're like.
But if they're sick and they're getting paid,
Right.
You have to take.
No, it's okay, I get it.
But I'm just saying, I know like with this
Right.
year, currently what we're doing is, we've had the extra that we had to amend to put into the overtime, but we were able to reduce the salaries.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, because remember when I said backfilling the positions, which is exactly right in the lion's share of it? Well, when someone retires, quits, whatever, leaves for whatever reason, they're, just like you said, that money, it's been budgeted, it's still there. So if they leave halfway through the year, and it takes me 6 months to get that position filled, that's 6 months of salaries. Well, all those positions that I'm having to backfill for that person that's gone, a lot of it can be offset by the salary being moved over, which is what she said, which is what we're doing right now.
And you
So,
did this kind of thing this year?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, we have, and remember, FMLA, sick, surgery, retirement, there's all kinds of things that come up that would cause us to have to backfill those spots.
That was just my main question.
That's a good question.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I guess my principal question is about the image. And you said you've made a philosophical shift to try to repair that. So do you think you're making progress? Because I often still hear those refrains from people.
No, I don't want to, if, that's not what I meant, if that's what I said. The image is there, it's going to be there. You're not going to, and that's okay, like I said, if people say, hey, don't go to Satellite Beach, don't drink and drive, don't, whatever. The philosophical image was with the agency and the community policing and the relationship with the community and the people. And that is absolutely, I've seen a difference because of that philosophy shift. I think it's going to take, it would take years and years to get rid of a reputation that's taken a long time to earn. So I think it would be short-sighted to think that we will get rid of that reputation, but I absolutely see the benefit to the community. What outside people that don't live here say about what they think we do or don't do isn't as big a concern as the people that live here.
Well, do you think it should be a concern? Because we talked about community
Oh,
development
yeah.
just before this,
Yeah.
and if people are afraid to come here,
Right.
then they're not going to come here and eat and drink and
Right.
marry along the way, so.
Well, no, I didn't say that it wasn't a concern, it's just not as much of a concern. But, again, if you are thinking about buying a business or coming here, and you talk to the people that are here, they're going to tell you the philosophy change, and they're going to tell you that, now, these people are great, they're always here, they protect my business, they're always going and knocking on doors. If they find an open door, they're coming here. The business community absolutely likes the police department, they love the police department. So there's definitely significant relationship there between the business community. I've had people many, many times say, the alarm goes off, and by the time I live around the corner from my own business. By the time I can get there, the cops are already there, checking everything out and doing their thing. So, yeah, the relationship is very, very good, and with the people that are here. And I think that spreads out. And yeah, I have noticed a difference.
I don't know if I share that same assessment with businesses in the area, that perception, but.
Yeah, the ones I've talked to,
I've
yeah.
lived here for my whole life.
Right?
And I'm out and about all the time, and I see the Chargers and the Crown Vics painted all black, parked
Right.
in places all over, and I don't know any of the police. No one's ever stopped and said, hey, what's going on? I mean, I see them all the time.
Right.
So, and I am invested in this city, and I'm thinking about starting another business here, but I'm concerned that, can I put a restaurant in here and have people come and eat and drink and not be, have a police car
Right.
sitting across the street, a black Charger with a white vinyl lettering,
Right.
and, looking menacing, so.
Yeah, we don't have any problem. I mean, people know that you come here and you do the right thing, and you don't commit any crimes, you're not going to have any problem. And that's clearly evident by our actions and by what we do. We're very, very reasonable with the people that live here. I mean, our entire DUI arrest for the year was 71, for the whole year. 15 years ago, there were more than 3 people made 100 DUI arrests by themselves in Satellite Beach, by themselves. Not 10 years ago, the average DUI arrest globally.
How do we broadcast that?
Well, I don't know. I don't know. I think how you do it is by walking the walk. And I think by talking to communities and people like I'm doing. When I talk to Rotary clubs and Lions clubs, and when officers are talking to people, and when people come in to the city and they say, yeah, we had a great time at whatever restaurant, and, you know, oh, well, did you have any problems with the police? No, because we weren't doing anything wrong, so we had no reason to have a problem. And they go, oh, so, yeah, I think people more want to see than to hear. Because I can give lip service all day long, but if I don't have the staff to back it up, it ain't doing anybody good. But the staff is backing it up, and it is making a difference.
So the final question, I guess, is volunteers are driving that boat? We own the boat.
Mhm, mhm.
Volunteers are driving that boat.
I see them.
They are. They are.
How do I become a volunteer?
It's wonderful. They go and they ride the ATV too. All you gotta do is fill out an application, pass the background check, you're in. They love it. I mean, every day they get out, they get in the boat, they check it all out. They're trained, they're all that.
I mean, I'm dying to get access to the river in the city, right? But,
Yeah. We'd love to have you. I mean, that's what it's all about. People come out, they give back to the community, they get trained, you go,
no,
and
man,
that's it.
if somebody stopped and said hello to me one time.
Right. I don't know. Maybe try them first. Maybe walk up and say hi to them first.
I've seen that, like I said, I've seen that brand new Fusion drive by with the, again, emblazoned with the citizen control and.
That car is so popular. You know, that car is so popular. It's actually won awards in the past, and there's a video game, true statement, there's a video game that is an absolute identical version of our police cars with, like, they just changed just enough to not be an issue. But people love the cars. They do. The biggest issue they ever talk about is, well, are they hot in the summer? And, you know, it's hot in the summer. I don't care if it's a white car or a black car. That 3 degrees isn't going to make a difference. You're just going to be hot.
I just wonder who's behind the wheel of all this, and what they're doing.
That's right.
They go by so fast, so you know.
Maybe you just go to the Central Police Academy. If you're able to, what days are those?
Yeah, it's usually from February to about May on Tuesday nights typically.
Yeah, if you keep a lookout for that, we usually advertise.
I've seen it in the, I've seen it in the beach.
I mean, that's a good way, like, I went through the first class, and I met a lot of folks that I don't normally see, like people with night shifts and stuff, so it was pretty helpful.
I am curious about Whiskey Pub on third Thursdays.
Yeah, next week at, you say it was 6 or 5?
5?
Happy on.
I think it's a 5.
I will confirm.
Yeah.
Pretty sure.
That's not my phone, otherwise I look on Facebook, because we push it on Facebook. Either 5 or 5:30, I do know
Stop by
that.
my house
Okay,
and say hi.
6 o'clock.
and walk over
No,
there.
it's 6, it's either 5 or 5:30.
I'll email you.
Okay.
It's on Facebook. Just look up what Whiskey Beach Pub, I'm sure it's on my page.
I went in there one time.
I would just like to commend the police department on the community policing aspect. I have 2 young kids, and I do see, you know, social media, especially the Facebook page, I think you guys do a great job. And just continuing to do more of that and being active, I think that is very effective for being involved in the community. So I think that's great. But again, I haven't interacted with the police a whole lot, but I do know that there are opportunities available. So I think that's great. I have a question. I didn't see anything on when a helicopter event. How many of those have we had in the last couple of years, or what is the threshold for when we call in a helicopter?
Good question. That's 2 questions. I would say we probably average every 6 weeks to 2 months, we'll have to call the helicopter out, roughly. There's times, again, like anything in police work, there's times where in a month it's 3 times, and then we won't have the helicopter out for 6 months. It just completely depends. The second question is a very, very good question. The threshold, because of the fact that we have such good training and veteran supervisors out there, the threshold and the relationship with the sheriff's office, is the patrol supervisor at night can make that decision to activate the helicopter. And it's unusual to have someone at that level have access to those resources. But knock on wood, in all of the years I've been here, we've never had an issue. One time years ago, prior to me being the chief, I was actually working on the squad that day. The sheriff called up and said, "You activated the helicopter for this, this, and this," and that's pretty expensive. I mean, what's the deal with that? They just didn't have all the information. Once they pulled it and explained, said, "Oh, well, I had activated my helicopter too," and that was it. In all of the time I can think of, just because of that relationship. So that would be the frequency, and that's the threshold.
Okay.
Were you looking for like a specific type of crime, maybe?
Yeah, well, I guess
Would that be helpful?
the thing I was referring to, I believe there were some break-ins of cars, and I recall driving to work one morning, this is probably a year ago, 2 years ago,
Right.
I don't know, and there were a lot of police force out,
Right.
helicopter, but again, I don't have all the information. I
Right.
didn't know if there was an armed individual or if it was just people opening doors to see if people had their doors unlocked in their cars.
Okay, maybe I can clear that up a little bit for you. If we have someone breaks into an unoccupied vehicle and they take off and we can't find them, but we think they're in the area, we're not calling a helicopter for that. Somebody breaks into a house where there's people in it and they take off and we think they're still in the area, we're calling a helicopter for that. So it would have to rise to the level of just something more than a couple of break-ins. A couple of residential break-ins, that's a big deal. Break into 3 or 4 cars, maybe not. You break into 20 cars, and we've got 20 different victims, and we think you're in the area, then yeah, that's a lot of victims and a lot of property, and a lot of property damage potentially, so then yes, we would do that. So that would be, I guess, the best way to describe, but like anything in this business, case by case.
Yeah, I'm sure after an incident where you call the helicopter, you do a postmortem on...
Yep, debrief, yep.
Yeah, okay. And then just a question regarding the STEP program.
Mhm.
You know, how many times a year do we do that?
That's relatively popular. We do that a lot. I would say probably 60, maybe 70 times. It's a selective traffic enforcement program, and that is where we have a specific problem with a specific area. You know, if somebody calls and says, every day after school, on my street, I get cars between, say, 3 and 5 just flying down the street. Can you help me? That would be a perfect candidate for a STEP program, selective traffic enforcement program. We would, because then we have information. So we would put someone out there, and it's all documented, every one of them, the person, the issue, it's assigned to an officer. The officer goes out, documents exactly what he or she saw. How many violations did they see? How many stops did they make? How many tickets did they write? How many warnings? Then we report back to the person who called us and say, okay, we went out there 3 times during the times you mentioned on 3 consecutive days, and this is what we found. And that's relatively popular. And that's just a more specific program than the general extra patrol. If somebody just calls and says, hey, you know, I get people speeding by my house, okay, when? Well, you know, it kind of varies. Well, like weekends, well, it just varies. That's an extra patrol issue because we can't pin it down. So, good question.
Yeah, thanks. I would like to also kind of reiterate, as a couple of other people have said, you know, thank you so much for your, you know, service to the city. I mean, you've certainly been here a heck of a lot longer than I have, so that goes long before I ever got here. But my family and I really do recognize the Satellite Beach Police Department, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Just kind of curious question. You talked about overtime briefly, and I think certainly the most of it comes from came from the hurricane and stuff like that last year. On the Friday overlap, is that ever overtime?
No.
No. And one other thing. Clearly, there are a lot of people that are interested in getting involved in volunteering for things that have to do with the police department and everything like that. You know, I noticed you mentioned that it was probably about $150,000 a year in value. the hours that people do give to the city and everything. Do you think that other departments and whatnot within the city could stand to benefit from that same type of volunteerism? Do you think that other departments get the same interest and the same volunteerism that the police department does? And do you believe that there's outreach and things like that your department does that others don't? Do you understand where I'm going with that?
I do, I believe. The fire department does get a lot of the same, because it's a fire department, so it's exciting, there's things to do. Would you get a whole lot of volunteers at Public Works? I don't know. Who wants to go volunteer to, like cut someone's grass or? Yeah, right, yeah. Yeah, one of my volunteers actually started and was helping Alan, because our ATV was broken and we didn't have the funds at the time, it wasn't in the plan yet, to replace it. So he started working on it, and then he started having a good time over at Public Works in the garage, and now he's fixing lawnmowers. He's just volunteer with the police department, but we just kind of let him go over there because wherever he's needed. So other departments, now we have used our volunteers to augment other departments for certain situations. We get calls, I don't know about regularly, but we have gotten calls from other department heads that say, hey, I have a situation where I need 10 people to do X, Y, and Z. No problem. We'll mobilize 10 people, we'll get it done. So we share, I guess. But again, the majority of the time is spent with the police department in the particular field. Because we have people, just like you said, that will say, I want to get on that ATV and ride up and down the beach. That's great. So they come in to do just that, or they say, that Stop By and Say Hi program is wonderful, and that's what they want to do. Some people say, I just want to come in and file paperwork. And we're like, hey, all right. And they do. They come in for 2 hours a day or 3 days a week and just file stuff. I mean, hey, whatever. As far as outreach, we do a lot of those things. A lot of it was listed in there, but we are so involved in the community and the different people here. Lieutenant Frost, there's a lot of the people that have been around. Unfortunately, there's a gap, like you mentioned, where the newer people that haven't really gotten a chance to get vested in the community visually, they're vested work-wise, clearly, but people like me and Commander Hodge, who's been in the department for 30 years, Linda, Darren Frost, all these people that live in the area, they're very recognizable and very out in the community. And we also do things with other agencies and other communities, whether it's fundraisers or anything, just to get out. We were one of the first to initiate the civil citation program, and that was one of the outreach programs that I said is wonderful, and I want to bring it here. Because, you're a kid, and you make a mistake. You're 15, and your buddy says, hey, let's steal this. And you're like, oh, I don't know, that doesn't sound right. And then next thing you know, you stole it, and you're in trouble. Well, do you need to be in the system? I don't think so, because I was a kid. I didn't say I stole stuff, but I was a kid, right? So I would have wanted, if I would have done something stupid at 14 or 15. So that civil citation is an outreach program that we've adopted, and that's one of several. And it's very popular. And we're one of the highest users of that in the entire county. And we have the fewest arrests, but proportionately, because we want to give people a second chance if we possibly can.
That's it for me tonight.
Certainly.
Mr. Whitney?
I don't have any questions. The only thing I want to share is that I was a recipient of Stop By and Say Hi for a while. Year after I moved here, when I was going through my cancer stuff, and they were extremely helpful. I got to talk to people who are not emotionally connected, and we were able to talk about stuff, and it was really cool. And now that gentleman and I play golf together on Tuesday.
If I had a nickel for every story that I heard like that, I often wonder who's getting the benefit. Is it the volunteers that are doing it, or the people they're visiting? Because, like I said, that's a whole part of someone's life that often is overlooked when you're talking about community wellness, or the whole person. Is emotional support and friendship, and so thank you.
No questions, thank you.
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
I just have one quick thing. Could you just tell me what the beach patrol, what's he do? He's a light kids out there, right?
The ATV?
Yeah, the beach, Sam who goes on the beach?
But different people.
What is he looking for? Not dogs.
Well, we are, but that's just a, geez, get me started on that subject. I'm getting killed with dogs on the beach, but, right. It's just patrolling the beach. It's just looking for somebody sleeping on the beach, somebody messing with a turtle nest, somebody camping on the beach that's not supposed to, somebody that's got glass that they're, I mean, just anything. It's more just because I don't think any part of the city should be unprotected or unobserved. And I just think that while we need the ATV for emergencies, we've used it for, a kid goes missing because he's with, they think he's in the water, they think he's over here, and so we'll mobilize the ATV and we'll do that. But their purpose is like the volunteers in the, on the boat, is to go out and be seen, be out there, have a radio, just make sure everything's the way it should be, and nobody's doing anything crazy, and so people see it and go, look, there's the police volunteers, they're out there just making sure everything's okay. Yeah, because presence is beautiful, and unfortunately in this business, you cannot quantify preventing crimes. How do you know how many crimes you prevented? Well, we're on our 5th consecutive year of dropping crime rate. Our crime rate dropped 12% this year again. That's a 5th consecutive year. I get a call from the sheriff every year going, how in the world do you do that? When you only have 2 crimes and then you drop to 1, that's a 50% drop. That's pretty impressive. Right, yeah. That's the problem, is we get people that think like that, and you go, okay, well, you're not working that through, but.
12%.
Any other questions for Chief Pearson?
I just have a comment.
Yes, ma'am.
I want to thank you, especially for being in the school zones, because that's my biggest pet peeve, is people who speed in the school zones, because I have a child. So thank you very much.
It's funny that you mention that, because, like when he was saying, I don't have anybody that stops and, says hi to me. I'll have, for every one of those, I get 5 people that go, yeah, I was talking to you yesterday, the other night, really cool, hang out. And then you'll say that, right? And then for every one of you, there's a couple people go, I can't believe that all you do is just sit in school zones looking for speeders. That's not what we're doing. It's a school zone. There's little kids in cars. And not to mention the fact that we want other people to see that we're around the schools where the kids are. So traffic is like this much of it. It's the visual presence to keep bad people away from doing bad things. And obviously, it's working, so.
Do you find
Anybody?
a lot of the criminals are coming from outside the city? It sounded like these are people that you
Most.
were actually
Mhm.
arresting and processing are
Most.
coming in from. So there's really nothing to do than just patrol and have presence.
Well, I wouldn't say that.
No, I
I mean,
didn't.
look at some of those stats.
No, I guess I didn't mean.
But yes, most of the crimes that are committed in this city are by people that do not live here. Yes, most.
My comment was, how do you prevent that from happening?
The problem is, we are a beachside community, so the assumption is, there's a lot of money over there, and it's a little beachside town, and they're small, so they're an easy target.
Yeah.
That's just the assumption for the Miami people, the Orlando people, the Tampa people. And what they soon realize is that our clearance rate is extremely high, and we catch people that come over here and do things much more often than anybody else does. So, yeah, when, we caught a bank robber from out of the area down the street. People don't catch bank robbers down the street. They just don't. You rob a bank, they get away, and then you do things and surveillance, and you put it on the TV and all that. We caught them within a mile of getting away.
Good job.
And it's just being out there and being in the community and having volunteers and people and cars and all that out. And people like to see it, and bad guys don't, and that's a beautiful combination. Thank you very much. Yes, I appreciate it.
Chief Pearson. All right, so at this time, I'd like to adjourn for adjourn until 8:10. So everybody has a chance to have a little break and that sort of thing.
Just be careful, it looks like they were just smoking in the lobby. Yeah, thank you. The never would trip. Yeah, that's good.
Okay. So, thanks, everybody. We will reconvene now. And moving on to agenda item number 6. Do we have any public comment on
new revenue ideas or expenditure reduction ideas? Okay, since there appears to be none of that, we could go round robin on the table with that and questions and comments from within the committee to the rest of the committee on new revenue ideas. And if I'm not mistaken, I mean, I've seen the list emailed out and then gone and added things to it and stuff like that, and I don't know if everybody else has or not. But are we working primarily from that tonight, or?
No, this is just really a placeholder for anything new you all have thought of or want to discuss. My intention, because we have our next meeting next Tuesday, the 14th, my intention is to give you the latest version of that document then, so if anything new has come out of this meeting, we'll add that to it. We will be prepared in the meeting to go through those 5-year forecast sheets and change millage rates on the fly if you want to talk about that. I know we had talked about, maximizing certain things or whatever. So we're just prepared to try to work together with you to build whatever additional recommendations you may have for the final report. And we're keeping it as open as possible for the 14th so that you all can, kind of follow up to your discussion of the last meeting and hopefully generate some more motions and direction for us. So that's really it. And I was not going to present any new information from the city standpoint tonight. This is simply just for you all. If you have anything else, if you don't, then maybe we could end early for the first time. But it's totally your.
That'd be unusual. That'd be remarkable. So is there anybody that objects to just going around robin, and then we could go around one more time so that everybody has the opportunity to comment or question on anything that anyone else has said during that? Okay, Ms. Sims?
So we're talking about revenue producing ideas for the idea list, which I'm working, I meant to have an email done for this actual meeting. I have several ideas that I'm not sure if they're really revenue generating in a sense of where you can count dollars up, but more so in, my idea is just to get more people from outside of Satellite Beach into our events and our community, even just to have the day at the beach be pleasant to where they're coming back and spending their dollars in our small businesses and that sort of thing. And then, so my suggestion to do that, and just based on seeing my own beach access, just to make sure that all of them, not just the bigger parks, are cared for, because I know that, we have small staff in the public works, but I think it'll go a long way for the residents also that use the smaller accesses to be able to, for example, at my Grant Avenue beach access, I don't want to go into too much detail and take too much time, but they had a bench placed by the, what do you call it, the shower thing, which never had a shower head on it. I don't know why people steal that, but they do, okay? So I get that, but really it's just a big mud puddle. And I can imagine if I was a mom with kids and I'm trying to wrangle a couple of kids off the beach and clean them off, and first of all, the bench that was there isn't there, and now it's way over here. And I would just challenge the guy to come and take a walk, whatever, or get down in the sand and then come up and wash your feet off and see how pleasant it would be. And for people that come in across the bridge, I'm just imagining, they don't live on the beach, so sand to them is like, oh my God, they don't want their car full of sand, their kids all dirty coming off the beach. That's just one small example of something I think we can do for the tourists that come over, for family members of residents that come to the smaller places, and then sort of going along the same lines of having, I think somebody else mentioned a for fee dog park, and my idea was to not have it be fee-based, and I don't really see the need to have a staff person there, and I would volunteer to watch dogs all day long on the beach, okay? I'll definitely do that if there needs to be a position, that somebody staffs or, watch people watching their dogs, sure, I'll do that. But I'm thinking of it more as a goodwill gesture to our folks that are in the northern maybe end of the city and can't really get down to Canova Park. And I understand, I don't have a dog, but I understand that it's a very small place that a lot of dogs go to. So, and I know that there's issues with dogs coming down onto our other beaches, I know that I've seen them going down on several different accesses. I'm not gonna point any out, because, I think, dogs and beaches, why not, if they're separated out? I just think it would be a cool thing to give back to people if we're raising fees and raising millage rates and all that kind of thing, and not have it be fee-based.
Well, I just want
Do
to
I-
say, do you want to make a motion about, I guess you're talking about removing the fees for the dog park and allowing dogs on the beach, do you want to make a motion for that?
Well, that's not really what I was proposing. I wasn't trying to touch the existing 4-feet dog park. I understand that generates some sort of revenue, so I don't want to take any revenue off the table. I'm just saying, in addition, to have something on the beach, because this park is not on the beach, am I correct?
Right.
Okay, so people want to take their dogs to the beach, right? Regardless, if there's a big sign there or not, they're taking them down there. And we're not, we just got a presentation, and we're not really enforcing that, and as I understand it, it's because of this new service animal, which really kind of gripes me. But, that's on a personal note. I hope to have one someday. And anyway, so it all stems from not being able on a federal level to ask people why they have the dog or whatever. Like, the service animal can be anywhere, right?
No, just going back, what was the beach access you were talking about?
Mine in particular is Granton. I'd like to go to some of the other smaller ones like Park, and I don't even know all of Scorpio. I don't know all of them that the city actually, and that's why I kind of wanted to get, I know he's a busy man, but I'd love to, get some time with Mr. Porter and maybe point out some of the street signs that he needs to have replaced as well, but. And then, I have other ideas. There's a whole huge email I'm putting together, so as much time as you guys want to give me, I can just talk all night.
Well, so to the group, but you can also, if you want to email it to me before the next meeting, which is
So there'll be
Tuesday,
more of
then I
us,
can put
more
on the
things
list.
to discuss, but I definitely want to give other people time for their ideas as well. So those are two main things that I know I already put in an email. And there's some other ones, fundraisers and, fish fries and softball tournaments like they used to do back in the day. I thought that would be kind of fun and nostalgic to bring back to the people who might support that. And I also have some ideas about a different sort of volunteer program that sort of maybe takes things away from the fire department and police that would allow them to do more of, what we might think they're designated for, and just have maybe a separate volunteer force that would involve neighbor to neighbor, and like getting to know who you live next to or who's in your block, that you can help directly as a neighbor and not as a, as a police car in the driveway or something. Just like, I'm thinking, let's get some kids involved with some elderly people that can help each other out, like, elderly people like to hear what the kids are doing, and kids can learn from our older folks and their experiences, and that they really were people back in the day. They had lives and they had challenges, and I just have a different idea of the volunteer programs. It's not really revenue generating, I guess. It's more goes to the overall goodwill of the city.
Please, Mr. Swift, let's take turns.
Is that enough for now? Because literally, I've got.
Whatever you want to do.
That's fine. Just in general, and then I guess you can look for more specific things on next week's.
On Tuesday,
Yeah, we can go over anything more in detail. I don't really have detail. I just have sort of. I thought this was sort of a brainstorming thing where we all would throw something out, and then you would, you could piggyback on, fundraising and marketing, and you know what I'm saying. I guess I had a different idea. So it's gonna work. So I don't have a lot of clear thought, I guess, not a lot of details.
Well, I think what could help the group just generally is if you want to try to get your ideas down to more of a, what you feel is more of a solid presentation on it.
And that's what I was
And if you can get that for us for Tuesday.
Absolutely.
Tuesday will be very similar to the last meeting, I think, where we had a lot of back and forth and discussion.
Perfect.
See how that goes up with the
Okay,
intention.
I will definitely have it ready. In fact, I wanted to have, and I didn't want to give it to you today on the day of.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
that's fine,
I just didn't want to do that to you, so.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure, thanks.
Okay, and so Ms. Cole, and I would just like to remind everybody, on the agenda item, what we're looking for really is to talk about new ideas for new And let's do try to take turns, and we can, take notes and stuff like that, and go around again, for each person, and that sort of thing.
At this time, I don't have anything to add to the list for new revenue ideas. I am looking forward to looking at the list again, or listening to everyone else. As far as expenditure reduction ideas, this is not something that can happen this year, but as the contracts come up, I would hope that the city could really look at some of the line items as far as the phone and the internet, and some of those things seemed incredibly high to me when I was looking at the budget in general. Otherwise, a majority of the departments in general to me seem to be operating very lean, and it has been hard for me to find a lot of areas where you could find expenditures to trim, but those stuck out to me in addition to trying to keep overtime in check.
What are those line items, I'm sorry?
They were, and we don't have those numbers, but it was like one of the first weeks we got the general.
The phone and internet are gonna be under that Department 19.
Yeah, and it was, and I know you said they were under like 3-year or 5-year contracts, and they're not negotiable for a couple more years, so. When they come up again, I think that's something that you really should be looking at again, because they seemed ridiculously high, even for a city. Just having a, business, even a small business, with everything that's in the cloud base now and things like that, it seems like a lot. It's kind of sad for those items. So, that's all I have at this moment.
I was not prepared tonight to make any specific ideas. I didn't know we would have an extra time after the presentations. I guess my thoughts are just that, I would encourage the code enforcement group to come up with a plan on how how they can fix the zoning or fix the codes or whatever to encourage more businesses to come here. And the same thing to the police, to recommend that maybe they do more community outreach. And in today's world, do they have any desire or motivation to move toward hiring some social workers or moving toward people that are controlled in that to help teen suicide rates at our school or the opioid epidemic or anything like that as part of this community health thing? And a comment to what Millie was saying about where neighbors know neighbors and everything. That's if only we could get there, maybe as part of our community health thing with the fire department or something, where to stop by a high program where we expand that a little bit to do more community outreach of some sort. As far as revenue ideas, for expenditures, of course, I want to cut everybody's department. I mean, or at least leave the millage rate where it is for another year and see what happens with the $600,000 and not raise the utility taxes and the stormwater things, and figure out a plan for that as well, of how we can meet the $6 million that we need to spend on infrastructure improvements a little more discreetly.
Excuse me. I agree that, when I look at the budgets, there's not a lot of opportunities. The one thing that's already on the list is the insurance, but I guess I wanted to just say where my head was at. We are in a growing economy, and people can leave for better pay at a different. So is that a lever we want to pull to reduce our city employee benefits? So I'm more focused on the revenue side, I guess. But I think the chair here had I really like the idea of expanding volunteerism to other areas, because I think, given our, growing economy, there's more community involvement with the current politics of the day. How do we take advantage of that with, ensure everybody volunteers, but with a growing economy, and more community activism, how do we harness some of that to make our income statement, whatever you want to call it, in the city improve. So no new ideas. I just wanted to kind of camp on to what others have said. That's it for me.
Along with what Ms. Call said, I really feel kind of the same way, that every presentation, I've seen, and, notwithstanding that, naturally any department head is not going to want to make a presentation on their own department that indicates that they have, money to spare or something like that. But I think that sincerely, that is the case, that everybody's running pretty lean. And I feel like it's very possible that if we're able to do anything that's going to actually help the departments, it's going to have to do with finding, like Ms. Call's saying, line items that for whatever reason, through no real fault of any individual, have just been left because it's not, it's a wheel that's not squeaking very loudly. And, and because budgets have been cut and staffs have been reduced and things like that, things that aren't actually on fire sometimes get overlooked. And so I would just like to reiterate that I think it's probably going to be, that's probably going to be fertile. Also, and I think I put something about this into the email, the idea list, to find things across departments, and I can't come up with the specific examples at the moment, but to find things, to find common tasks across departments that might be able to be centralized. And as much as any of us hate this, if that leads to, unfortunately, eliminating a position here and there, then, it is all about, this whole thing is all about, right-sizing the budget as much as possible. So, and those tend to be real big deals. Along with Mr. Schlur, an increase in the millage would be very hard to take back. And if there is some, uncertainty in how the new additional homestead exemption is going to affect us, to what extent it's going to affect us financially and everything like that. I think it is real wise, and I'm not above, or I'm not against, forgive me, recommending an increase in millage, and as a resident, I'm not wholly against paying for it either. I think it's, certainly a big lever, and, as much as possible, we should try to put it at the end of the list. And along with what Mr. Rector said, cutting benefits to, I think if we had to cut, if the city had to cut something, benefits across the board, or one or two positions and maintain the benefits, if the city had to make that difficult decision, I think the smarter way would be to maintain the benefits and cut positions. Because the cutting the benefits, while you might save, cutting a position, it jeopardizes all of them. And it jeopardizes them not just to the people that, are supporting their families on those jobs, and then to have, and now our insurance is hinky and, everything. So it puts stresses on them. You have people beginning to spend their time at work during the day looking on Monster.com rather than doing their job, and all kinds of stuff like that, whereas, if a person gets cut from a position, certainly everybody hopes and prays that they find a new one soon. But, and so the people that are still there are pissed about it, but they don't like to quit over it. And I'm still pretty adamant that there are ways for the city to improve upon the revenues that are generated from the rec program. I think there are probably, and not that there's anything wrong with what the rec program does, but I think there are probably ways to, like somebody mentioned in that report or in that presentation, that we lost the Taekwondo program because it just became too popular and we couldn't house it any longer. And I think it'd just be much better to find some additional housing for that program than to just let it go away or, you know, have to see it go away. I think that's all I have for tonight. Thanks. Mrs. Whitney?
I don't think anybody really wants to raise taxes. I think what we really need to do as a community is get the right level of taxes for the amount of work that has to be done in the city for the city to operate effectively. So what we're attempting to do here is, by keeping expenses steady, trying to find new revenue streams in order to keep our taxes either consistent where they are and not go up as much as maybe some of us think about planning. Where I'm going with all of this is, and if I say this out of line, I stand corrected, but all of the revenue ideas, and I'm using the word all, but there may be a few here and there, they're really marginal. There's nothing that you can take and put in the budget for the 1920 budget and say, okay, we can rely on $10,000 for this. They're all things that need to be implemented because they feel good, they sound good, and they have to be tested. And over time, we'll see what kind of activity we actually get from those kinds of things. Based on that, and based on the fact that the likelihood that the $25,000 thing is going to go through, it's very unlikely that it won't go through. It's only prudent that we make a plan that has that in it. And for any reason, if it doesn't occur, we can adjust, okay? You said something that I'm not sure I'm clear on. You said it's hard to take back the millage rate?
No, I mean...
I just need clarification of what you meant by that. Because you can raise it one year and lower it the next year, right?
I suppose you can.
Right, you can. You can adjust to what your needs are. And really what we need is a needs-based budget. What we really need to be discussing, if you want to cut anything at all, is what are the needs? What are the real needs?
Were you asking me, or?
I was asking, come on, no. I was asking if there was something I didn't understand about where you were coming from on that, because I had this other understanding.
I meant that in general, once something is added to the budget of any organization, they're generally somewhat reluctant to give it up.
Okay. We cut the millage rate a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah, we've been cutting it for, what?
Since 2011.
Wow.
Every
Okay.
year it's gone down.
So I think it's not arbitrary, but it can fit into the ongoing plan of where you need to get revenue from. I would like to think that we have to do what we have to do, and then as these new revenue streams start to take hold, you can reduce the requirement for that. But in the meantime, I don't think it's responsible for the city to not take care of the things that they need to take care of on an ongoing basis. We have infrastructure, we have fire, we have security, we have all of the requirements by state, county, and federal that have to be met. We don't have a choice about those things. So the only thing I could really come up with of any substance, from my point of view, from my background, is that I would like to see the budget process looked at through different eyes, through different filters. The budget process, I'm just looking at this from a very high level. The budget process I see here is very similar to what you see in most government agencies. Whatever it was last year, if we can keep it within 2% growth, we're doing okay, all right? As opposed to perhaps using the opposite approach and doing a zero-based budget and figuring out exactly what you need per person, per line item, per thing, and have everybody implement that in the budget. Then you compare that to what you're already doing and see if there's any improvement without making any drastic changes. Drastic change is not something you want to do. You really don't want to cut people unless you don't have any choice. You certainly don't want to touch their benefits. We don't give benefits, whether it's here or anywhere else, you don't give benefits because you're a nice guy and you just want to give people benefits. You give it to them because you want to hire and you want to retain qualified employees. That's the only reason you do it. So if the economy is expanding and salaries are going up and there are more jobs available, the last thing you want to do is have your people attracted away for a few bucks. That is short-term, you save a couple of bucks, but over the next couple of 5 years, it costs you a fortune. There's nothing more expensive than turnover, especially in skilled positions. There's nothing more expensive. So my recommendation that I would like to see in here is that we review the budget through different eyes. That's all I have.
I think, like the majority of the committee members, I've appreciated being part of the process and sitting through the presentations. I've learned a lot. I don't see expense cutting opportunities. I just don't see excess in budgets. I think one of the items that we talked about last week is to perhaps budget and try to budget for emergency events to help control overtime, or at least manage it. It is just expense management, and again, while we have a list of ideas that I think will add value, I think we need to be mindful not to overwhelm a department that's already not staffed to absorb all of it, because I don't see ideas that are going to make immediate hits, and we say that, this money's raining in from this. I echo Larry's sentiments that I think they're good things. I think we should be mindful about what we choose. I think, if it relates to values and quality of life here are wonderful, then we'll see what we get out of it. So out of that, I'm not going to say I guess I'm saying I'm for it. I don't see any other way to increase revenues is to come up with a millage rate that's going to get us where we need to be. And I think Larry just made a great suggestion about zero base, because we've been putting Band-Aids on stuff for a while. And I mean, we're helping address a pain point right now, but something else is going to crack, which is going to stress something else and require funds. So if there's a way to improve the budget process for actual need and not excessive, not saying, great, dump all this stuff in here, but be realistic about it, I think that would be a good exercise to do as well.
I had one quick question for, I guess for maybe you, Suzanne. How, or maybe if we talked about it already, I apologize. How does the city market itself besides all the separate Facebook pages? Like how you have Chamber of Commerce, or I'm sorry to be that ignorant, but how do we market ourselves to the wide world to come and visit our beautiful beaches and?
So just the wide world of marketing. I guess the short answer to that is there's not anything big or significant. Like we don't have the billboards along 95, Cocoa Beach does, or we're members of both the Cocoa Beach Chamber of Commerce and the Melbourne Chamber of Commerce. So as much as possible, Courtney and myself, Mindy Gibson, one of the councilors, we try to get to those meetings and interact with people. I know when I've done, I've actually met business owners who are part of Satellite Beach, so that's been a nice opportunity to talk to them and see what they're thinking. That's really probably the most outward-facing stuff we do. We send out the beach caster to communicate to our residents every couple of months. Sorry? Oh, we're members of the Economic Development Commission, the EDC. They have meetings. I don't go to those. Courtney does, but I know she goes to those regularly. But beyond that, I don't know if there's anything real big that we do to market.
Formal.
Yeah.
We
don't
sell T-shirts and caps and
water
bottles.
Not like Cocoa Beach, they probably have T-shirts with Cocoa Beach and stuff all over.
Yeah. I was just
rain safe.
Yeah, one of my.
Yeah, I would guess, I haven't been here as long as some of you all, but I would guess that part of that is because while we have a tourism base in terms of people coming to the beach, we're not built as a tourist location, community destination, we're built as a residential community that has certain values and an environment that we've created and tried to maintain for ourselves, I think. It's my takeaway, I mean.
So the city doesn't really want to necessarily go in that direction, they're becoming a Cocoa Beach tourist.
Yeah, I don't never get that from anybody. I
Right,
don't know about
right,
you
no, I'm
all.
not suggesting that we
Yeah.
do, but just,
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of bringing people in and bringing their money into our community, we're gonna have to do some sort of marketing. I
Yeah,
think.
it's an interesting point and question, how do you?
How do you not make it a spring break place? And-
Right, right,
Yeah.
to find a balance there.
Right, exactly. Okay.
I guess, I don't know, I might have to jump on the bandwagon of open air, but.
Wait, what's over there?
Little
Come
All
on.
right, no, I mean, it's, you know, it's
What's
not.
over there? I can't see it.
No, with Larry and.
Oh, forget about it.
But it's, I have to say that I think, I felt this way for a little while, but I didn't want to formulate the opinion. I still wanted to keep everything open for a while, but looking at a lot of the numbers, I think I've been kind of disappointed when I first looked back at the 10-year and realized that we had a millage rate that was higher, and then they lowered it, and then we started accumulating debt for the city, and then we're in this precarious position, and these last two hurricanes have taken out the, reserve that we've had, and from my background, when you look at personal finance, that is a recipe for disaster. So, you're like one more away from problems, you know what I mean? And so, in my mind, had they left that rate the same for the last, we're looking at 7 years, none of this would be here.
The reserve would be different, right?
Granted, you'd have to have some givens there, that they kept the expenses the same, and they were operating at the same lean structure that you were doing, but I just, and like I said, nobody ever wants to be the person that says, oh, we're gonna raise taxes on you, but again, I came back to Satellite Beach because I love this area and I love the things that it offers, and I run the numbers on my own home, you know what I mean, and I'm okay, I guess that's what I have to prepare for if that's were to happen. I kind of feel like for the city to be still offering the values that we want and the expectation for the people that live here, we need those revenue sources to come back for the, and to rebuild the coffers, so to speak. So that way, the reserves are there, and we have the money to, I don't want people dumping in my canal anymore. I'm sorry. I mean, it's, personal reasons aside, but, not that it was in my personal canal, but, just, I don't know. I just kind of feel like, not even that it needs to go that high maybe, but we need to look at a nice number that maybe we can agree on.
How high was it?
It was 8.5 something.
Can I comment on that?
Yes.
If you want to give it your turn in the round robin.
Sorry, or just wait
I
until
want
your turn.
you to comment on her statement. If we can't do that, then just continue.
Or just wait.
It's up to
until
you,
your
you
turn.
can give up your next turn.
That's ridiculous. Go ahead.
Just wait.
Yes, give up your turn, Larry, please.
Just write it down
Is it my turn now?
and say it when it's your turn.
Next call is
Just write it down. That's really it. I think, like I said before, I didn't see a whole lot of expenditure things. They're right in what they said. Well, there might be a few ideas on there that the city could explore for, possible opportunities to bring in some money. It's not going to be that big bang that, we're probably going to need. So I think we're going to have to look at a number that most of us can agree on to recommend to the council.
Well, to comment on Ms. Call's comments, it's interesting, I also have the same perspective that all this debt that we got ourselves into is a recipe for disaster we're coming to. But I was thinking, and I've been having, thinking hard about this revenue thing, how do we generate more revenue? And I was thinking that, we already allow golf carts in the city, right? So, and I'm not opposed to us being an incubator for businesses. So like the recreation department was hosting the Taekwondo as the example we have, right, and it got too big and moved on. And I'm okay with doing that, building businesses that stay in the area, and maybe even if we could get some royalties along the way, if we do that. But a city tour, I mean, a lot of cities you go to where there's some history, right? There's little businesses where you can go to the Chamber of Commerce or something, you get a map and have a walking tour, right? So we're not really set up for a real good walking tour because there's long, hot spaces. But if we have all these volunteers and we have some golf carts, maybe we could set up through this place, through the city hall or the rec department or something, $20. You're at the beach all day. You hop on a tram and you go to a little history. You see the river. You see maybe they could even include a trip on the boat to the island or something, right? And that could generate income and generate interest and knowledge about the city, I think, as well. And if it spawned into a bigger business, I'm okay with, somebody grabbing onto that and making it bigger and launching off into some other kind of thing, but.
I don't have anything further, but I like that idea.
Me too.
I mean, I think people would pay, oftentimes you go to cities and it's free to do a walking tour, but if you put them on a tram and you included lunch at a local restaurant around, $10 for the afternoon or something, and kids are at the beach, I don't want to be so hot and sweaty or something, right?
Yeah, I've lived here 7 or 8 years and I've never been yet, so.
We have to change that.
Let's get on tour bus. I'll be on it.
It's interesting, I don't know who was on the recording secretary at that time, but on the sustainability board, Dave Bigliotti brought it up several times and he's really involved in Sampson's Island, brought it up a number of times that we should, as a city, have some sort of tours over to that. And hey, after a few times they get to liking it, you can start charging them for it. And it's not the same thing, certainly kind of similar. And now I've heard that come up 2 times from different, almost entirely different groups of people. The city, somebody was asking about the Chamber of Commerce and everything like that, and it seems like we will have, for the first time, host a Wednesday Friends Day event from Cocoa Beach Chamber of Commerce. I think it's not until August, or not August, February, forgive me, I think it's February. But, in a meeting with Courtney, it was, the very next Wednesday that's available, yeah, we'll do that. And I go to those events each month. And I think the ones that I've been to that are hosted by a city, I think they really do a lot to represent the city's, open arms, so to speak, for business to come and put roots there and that sort of thing. And, like a lot of other people have said, all of the things that we're talking about, these different ideas that each of us have had, they do take time to grow and everything like that. And again, I'll refer back to the rec department. And I don't remember the number now, but when I read it, I was really amazed at how much revenue comes in to the comes into the city from the rec department. I mean, that's a gold mine. And I don't remember what percentage. I thought, okay, well, such and such percentage increase in the revenues from that, is such and such percentage of the $600,000 hole. And so I think, even though those things are, take time to germinate and everything like that, they don't take forever. Because people sign up for those things for their kids, at school. as you get close to the end of the next school year, everybody starts searching around, and, you know, the more in your face it is, the more, to yours and your children's liking, those things are, the quicker they get filled up. We've tried to sign our kids up to programs here that were already full. And, I don't remember who it was, but yeah, I agree completely. Any conversations I've ever had with anybody in this town, and they haven't been just a couple, residents here, I think, are generally dead set against having the same type of economy, no matter how robust Cocoa Beach has. It's just people don't, and it's really amazing to me, you know, my colleagues at work and other people that I run into, the kind of reputation Satellite Beach has, how contrary it is to what, I mean, just from outside, is how contrary it is to what really goes on here. And, you know, nobody really wants to see Satellite Beach turn into party downtown. And that's it.
Well, when he said nobody, he wasn't referring to you.
Well, for me,
Almost.
a percentage equivalent to almost nobody.
Let me clarify, if I gave that impression that that's what I wanted for my city, it's totally not. I don't want that sort of atmosphere.
No, I don't think I
No,
understood
we're
it
working
real
for you.
clearly. I'm in complete agreement with it, and my point was that I think most folks are in agreement with it.
Right, I would hope so.
But we want some entertainment.
But that's what I was saying, there has to be a balance between bringing in people from outside and balancing that with we don't want, you know, that's gonna be increased traffic and crime and, you know, everything that comes with having more people come in, as well as they leaving their money here at our local businesses. Right, so that's, I guess, the balance.
Okay. I'm going to go back to something that we talked about at the last meeting, because nobody wants to raise the military. None of us ever want to raise rates. It's just not a good thing to do. But if you take the rate that we're going to increase the water tax, what?
Stormwater?
Yeah, $100 a year per household?
Correct.
And raise the even if we took the millage rate all the way up to what we were referring to, and I'm not making light of this because some people struggle more than others, okay? But we're talking about a total of $25 a month per household. That's the size of the issue that we're dealing with. $25 a month per household to fix it all.
Oh, I know, yeah.
It's not, to me,
Well, it depends on the household. but-
absolutely, there's no question about it, but to me, $25 in this day and age per month is not like we're going to drive people out of the
Don't go out to
community.
dinner one night.
Huh?
Don't go out to dinner one night.
That's usually the size of the tip, I mean.
No,
But please, I think we need to keep in context what we're actually asking for, because when you just say raise millage rate, raise this rate, it sounds like a ton of money. But per household, we're really not talking a whole lot. Some people will be annoyed by it, but nobody's gonna get nuts over $25 a month. I just can't see it.
Larry, to some of us, it's a lot more than 25.
Well, but you're not a single household, you have a different perspective, because you have a number of properties.
Yeah, but it's gonna be thousands of dollars to meet this tax increase.
I don't know what to do about that, I don't know even what to say about that.
I do. Don't you have write-offs because it's a business expense?
I do.
Okay, because a lot of that stuff's fully write-off for you.
It is, but it's still, I mean, I write it off, but I still spend it every year.
Look,
I mean, I earn the money and I
Increase their
spend
rent by
it.
$25 a month.
as a
Well,
business,
that's what I'm trying to tell the city not to do. I'm trying to tell the city not to just raise the income.
I'm talking $25 a month,
A month,
and about
I'm sorry.
$300 a year annually,
Okay, and.
okay?
That's what I mean, sorry.
He's in business,
Yeah.
and his job is to lower his expenses as much as possible, raise his revenue as much as possible. And then live somewhere in the middle of that. I
Value
understand.
for what I pay, I guess, is what
I'm not disagreeing with that, but you're not indicative of the 4,192 households that are in the community, so that it's difficult to absorb that into this conversation, because we're actually trying to represent the majority of people, or the majority of households. So it would be very, very difficult to say you can't raise anything because you and maybe, and I'm not picking it, I promise I'm not, but you and people like you in that condition, because maybe there's 10 of you that might get harmed to some degree, that 4,100 other households should suffer because of that. It just doesn't work, so it's a problem.
Ms. Berger?
I have nothing further.
Unless there are any other comments around the table,
I would like to make one more comment.
Okay.
Based on what Larry's saying, it's true. But it's, yeah, I mean, it's the values and the image and the reputation of the city and how much we all pay for that and what the value we get out of it. So I guess I'm just sitting here saying that I pay a lot in taxes, and I get this sense that I'm paying too much for fire and too much for police and not getting
I understand.
a return of commercial endeavorment and entertainment that I want to see.
Have a fire once a quarter, and then you'll feel like you got your money.
I need to join more, I need to join more committees. I need to become a volunteer citizen.
I don't know how you get value around it.
Well, I think I get value because of some of the things we talked about here. We want to have a little more tourism, we want to get a little more of that, we want more, because all of our property values go up when the value of the city goes up, right? So that, how do we raise the value, the assessed value, without raising the millage rate? We'll make more money, but how do we raise the value of the city? And so what quality are we looking for? And we hear Suzanne coming from the outside came in and said, well, we seem to be building for ourselves, and we don't want outside people here, right? And we need to shed that, I think, a little bit. And how do we provide direction through this report to the council? If that's what we want to do. If that's what we want to do. I mean, that's just my opinion, so.
Well, that, to me, can I speak?
Yeah, I think.
To me, that opinion is extremely important, because that's come up, I've only lived there 4 years, so I don't have the background that you and some of you others have. But since I've been here for 4 years, I've come to quite a few city council meetings. This thing's been on the agenda many, many times, trying to figure out what our identity is, and it's a struggle back and forth. There's no question about it. If we get 500 new businesses downtown, look what it'll do to the tax structure, but look what it does to your quality of life. I mean, people can't figure out who we are. We don't really have, there's a whole bedroom community other than A1A.
But, and then you have all of these other citizens that are going to be coming in from all of these new construction, right, developments and stuff. So we have to take into consideration there's going to be all these other people looking for services, looking for restaurants. I mean, we're going to have an influx of how many hundred people in these.
Some of them are transient, right? Snowbirds.
I mean, still, you're going to have, there'll be more people to support those businesses.
Regardless, there'll be another 1,200 people. That's
100 people, that's true.
I'm not knocking the 1,200 people, but that doesn't compare to Cocoa Beach getting 10,000 that day for the beach. It's just
We
different.
just said we didn't want to be Cocoa Beach.
No, we don't. But people that are attracted to the beach that come from out of town like that kind. They want to go to Coconuts for lunch, and they want to walk around and look at all the shops.
Is that why we don't have food trucks?
Well, some entertainment.
Like what?
Like a bowling alley?
Yes.
Like a,
I love to bowl, so
like
yeah.
an event space where
That's
there's,
revenue. We
where
just
people
build our
can
own, and
play,
that's
or
revenue.
comedians
That's a revenue
come,
stream.
or something to do. in the
Local
evening.
community playhouse kind of thing.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be cool.
We don't have anything like that
Yeah,
here,
I
right?
like that idea. Why don't we?
Most of those are actually being funded by outside sources because they're losing money.
Yeah,
That's-
I was going to say, that's definitely not revenue.
All these things we're talking about, small or large, require upfront funding.
Exactly.
And then we need to attract investors, right?
I don't think we have to do all that.
I don't know about it.
I just look at the amount of empty retail space, and it's like,
Yeah.
so they're clearly business people who are saying, I don't see a value proposition.
Exactly my
Yeah,
point.
yeah.
Right, right. right at the end of Norwood, there's a
That's why,
parking lot, right?
that's why I said, that we're doing all, they're doing all this work, and it's commendable, but look at the outcomes. City can only do so much. The rest of it is having a population that wants to spend money, because without, I don't have to tell you, without revenue, it doesn't matter what your expenses are, you're in business. You gotta have revenue. Revenue pays for everything.
Right, so how do we increase the value of our city? I guess that's why we're here.
Right.
What do we do? So let me try this again, though, if I may. Make a motion?
Before you do, I'd just like to point out to the committee that we are 2 minutes over time now.
Okay.
And we have consensus to
Go for it.
go on.
No, we have the
Go
next,
for it.
we have the next meeting to full discussion.
No,
Yeah, then we can
if
discuss
everyone's
it,
okay with
please.
it, and the recording secretary and the staff? Okay.
We need to get to a natural breaking point. It's not great to break in the middle of the conversation. We need to somehow.
Well, based on tonight's conversation, I just want to try my motion again. I move that we add a recommendation to our report to the city council to leave the millage rate as it is for this next year's budget.
No seconds.
It's a compromise.
I'm not hearing you.
Yeah, we're not hearing a second on that.
Yeah.
Naturally.
No,
I didn't get a second the last time I tried it, the last time. But there's more people here this time, so.
If you bring rum and scotch, you got a better shot. If we're sober, they can.
Take a note.
And, I'm sorry, I'd like to add one quick comment. Being, somewhat involved in the leasing of retail space and having worked on some things in Satellite Beach and attempted some things in Satellite Beach, my personal experience has been that landlords and owners that I've dealt with seem to have a lot of times kind of the same opinion of landlords that I've dealt with in, on New Haven in downtown Melbourne, that this is just worth a whole lot more than you think it is. And, take your money somewhere else if you don't like it. And, to the extent that in the long scheme of how they plan their own finances, to the extent that it doesn't really hurt them, I have personally experienced a real hard time convincing the landlord otherwise. And tenants always want to say, well, that place has been empty for 3 years, so, what kind of money are you making on it? You should be happy with my $1,500 a month. And that, the real truth is that's just not how it works. Somebody that owns maybe, one small place with 3 units in it, yeah, that is how it works, and they're really feeling that pain. To somebody that owns several buildings and each one has such and such percent occupancy, it's not as big a deal to them.
Is that because they model the business on a certain occupancy level, or as long as they're there, they're okay financially? Because I quite frankly
personally know all the answers to
No,
that.
of course not, none of us do,
But
but I
it's-
don't understand why they would be happy to leave a building, a space vacant for 3 years rather than...
Well,
Because
when
I really don't know.
when you lease something to somebody, it's off the market. And if I lease you something for what I regard as half price and I let you lock it up for 5 years, I've just sold, for what I regard as half price, I've just sold my opportunity to lease that to a better tenant.
Well, my lease experience with locally was, I agreed to lease increases by month for every year of the lease.
And that's typical.
And they didn't want it.
There's a lot more creative ways to go about it. I mean, if I had commercial space to lease here, I would say, okay, I'll lease it to you for $10 a month, whatever. Let's work out a deal where I get 1% of your net profits for the year of business, and then I'm going to help you grow your business, right? So there's creative ways around all these problems. We just need to find a solution.
That goes on a lot in New Jersey with businesses.
Well, it should go on here too.
I'm just saying that it's from my own experience.
And need experience on how to do things like that.
And do we have a specific process for wrap up and review, or should I just be looking for a motion to adjourn?
I think your motion is perfectly fine.
Anyone?
I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
A second.
I've done that in motion.
Thank you. No, this is a really good, meeting this time. It was really positive.
Don't forget Tuesday.
What Tuesday?